Hello and welcome to Talkernate History, the podcast where we,
Matt
and Max, talk about works of alternate history scenarios, and history in general. This one is going to be about this little thing called World War II.
Ever heard of it?
Ever heard of it?
I hadn't heard of it until recently.
Yeah. We've never really talked about it before, but I'm glad we're getting into kind of this overlooked and obscure part of history. But to be more specific than just World War II around the Mediterranean.
Mediterranean theater, baby. MTO, all the way.
Specifically starting around, I guess, maybe Torch or around... No, actually, I guess the British operations in Northern Africa.
We'll touch a little bit on that. But as with anything in history, it doesn't get interesting until America gets involved.
This is very true.
History starts July 4th, 1776.
Bunker Hill, that happened before. That doesn't count.
Sorry, doesn't count.
Doesn't count, yeah.
No, so we're going to talk about Mediterranean theater. We'll focus primarily Torch and onwards. I think one of the things, we'll revisit this at the end, is that why is the Mediterranean theater important? Because I think it doesn't get enough attention in perhaps, I mean, obviously in the scholarly world, it gets a lot of attention, but in the broader scope of how Americans particularly see the war, it doesn't get a lot of attention. Is it important? Is it important? That's a real question. Is it? Is it not? Was it a colossal strategic diversion, as some American generals in World War II thought? Or is it a vital theater of the war? Is it the most important theater of the war?
Or is it perhaps somewhere in between?
Well, I'm excited. I've been wanting to do this one for a while. I think there's a lot of fun you can have with it. So
yeah.
Well, let's get going, Max.
Let's get going. Well, let's start at the beginning, from the American perspective, that is, in North Africa, Operation Torch. So the first Axis enemies that the United States attacked were the French, the Vichy French.
Yes.
Which is just bizarre to think about. I was shocked when I was reading Rick Atkinson's Army at Dawn, and he kind of really hit that home. It was very surprising to me.
You have to, I mean, I cannot recommend highly enough the Liberation Trilogy, and you need to read all of them, but you really have to read An Army at Dawn, which is about North Africa, and Day of Battle.
Yeah.
Which is about Sicily and Italy up until July 44.
I finished Day of Battle as of about an hour and a half ago, like right before you showed up. So, and I can attest, it is quite good. It's very, very
great
good.
books. But I think, and this is something as we talk into the specific scenarios, but a lot of Americans they think World War II there was Pearl Harbor, and then there was some stuff happening, maybe in the desert, we're not really sure. And then there was D-Day, and Tom Hanks saved Matt Damon. And then there's the Battle of the Bulge, which may or may not have been fought in the desert, depending on which movie you watch. If you watch Band of Brothers, it's accurate. If you watch Battle of the Bulge, you come out thinking that the desert got moved up to Belgium.
The barren plains of Spain is where this was fought, yeah.
And then we kicked Germany's ass, and then we dropped the atomic bomb on Japan, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
But so we have this view of that we just went in there and we just kicked everyone's butts. And Tom Hanks died, but it was a valid sacrifice.
Yes.
North Africa was a disaster in many ways for the United States.
Yes. That's something that Rick Atkinson really tries to drive home, especially in An Army at Dawn, is just how incompetent and just no clue what anybody's doing in the American military at the beginning of World War II.
Yeah. I mean, there were some great successes in North Africa, particularly towards the end for the Americans, but a lot of big mistakes, huge mistakes.
Kasserine Pass, for instance.
Kasserine was a disaster. There was a lead up in December of 42. There was sort of a rush out of Algeria into Tunisia, and American forces got very close to Bizerte and not that far from Tunis, and they got driven back by German counterattacks. And he does a great job in the book about describing just all the problems in command and control and with the equipment and training. I mean, we're talking basically a year after Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
And you have this army that's built in many ways by draftees and the problems they go through. And that, and it's also humbling because it's true is that Eisenhower was not some just genius who could just do everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, he made serious mistakes in who he chose to lead it. Lloyd Friedendahl, I mean, not a great commander.
But you don't know that until, you get some experience. There was an airborne operation at the beginning of Torch that was like a complete disaster. Was just terrible.
Yeah, the first major American use of paratroopers. But Torch, I guess the quick overview is that you may know is that American and British forces land in Algeria and Morocco. Patton lands in Morocco. Joint American and British forces land in Algeria. Moments of fighting in Torch, but it was no way nearly as bad as it could have been. We made a lot of mistakes. And I think something that we'll probably talk about a lot of here is that perhaps those mistakes were useful.
Also, some pretty strange things happened at the beginning of Torch. For instance, General Mark Clark went ashore and talked to, I think it's Admiral Darlan of the Vichy,
or at least his representatives.
Yeah.
Landed by a submarine.
Yeah, which is crazy, beyond crazy.
And it was quite a brave act. I mean,
yeah.
And he nearly escaped capture, and it was kind of a close run thing.
We're going to get into Mark Clark more later. He's one of the most controversial commanders of any nation during World War II. For good reason, but one thing you can say about him is that he did not lack physical courage. He did not have a problem putting himself into danger, as evidenced by this bizarre secret late
mission,
night.
which was important in understanding that the Vichy government was probably willing to negotiate or come to some sort of settlement.
They weren't going to fight to the last
man
to protect
the last Labelle round. But the Vichy did fight. I mean, there were several days of fighting. Yeah. I mean, this was no joke. American soldiers were killed. I mean, they were almost repulsed in a couple places. Other places it went very easily, the landings, but there was a direct assault by some American troops on the port of was it Iran?
I think so.
And like taking in these old British ships. I think they were armored infantrymen from the 1st Armored Division. And they got like butchered.
Yeah.
The French Navy, I remember Atkinson said the French Navy fought harder than the French Army did at Torch.
Well, part of that is because they got friggin' bombed in port by the British. Remember that?
At Mirs El Kabir.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the Allies get a footing. They push into Tunisia. They get stopped. Montgomery eventually comes up through Libya. He's been chasing the Africa Corps. There's the disaster at Kasserine. The Allies sort of regroup and then launch a coordinated offensive. And by early May 1943...
Could you get in a little bit more about the disaster at Kasserine?
So Kasserine was an attempted American offensive. Basically, the American forces kind of got scattered about, and the Germans saw this as a time to counterattack and potentially roll up the Allied line in western Tunisia, drive it back into Algeria, perhaps take some of Algeria, cut off some ports, and maybe earn back some airfields in eastern Algeria that the Allies had captured. This attack it was a panzer-focused attack, caught American forces scattered pretty badly and just chopped them up piecemeal. And there was a lot of deficiencies in equipment at this point. This is not, we weren't running around with late model M4 Shermans and Pershings. There were M4 Shermans by that time, early models, M3 Lees, which the Soviets supposedly referred to as a coffin for 7. Keep your armor thin, straight, and high up.
Tall.
Highest profile.
Tall as possible, yeah.
To scare all those infantrymen.
With that massive, gigantic, what is it? What's the millimeter? 75?
75 and a sponsoon in the front, but that Pee-wee 37 in
That's
the top.
Right, yeah.
And then M3 Lees, M3 Stuarts, which are very fine scouting tanks, but not so good for standing in a standing fight with 1943 issue Panzer tanks.
So just kind of touching on the M3 thing, it's very confusing the way things are named. Like, it's the M3 Lee and it's also the M3 Stuart at the same time. Like, what are you doing, guys?
The M1903 Springfield, but the M1 Garand.
Yeah, and so many other M1s all over the place.
Yes, the M1 Abrams. We should have moved to types like the Japanese.
What's a type?
Type 75.
Oh,
type
God,
59.
yeah. I think they're still doing that to this day.
Why? The Japanese self-defense force.
Like the Hoa, the assault rifle they use is a type something or other. I can't remember off the top of my head. But
one of the Ace stories, the Killer Carter one, he fights. They're like type 47 dirigibles.
That's
Japanese
right.
Dirigible.
I remember that.
Or 60. I can't remember. 67, 40, some number. I just picked a number randomly.
Well, that's what they do too. So it doesn't actually mean anything.
So
It's like how the F-22 was not made in 1922, nor 2022. It's just a number.
F-30. Then we skipped to F-35, maybe because it sounded cooler than the F-23.
Maybe because there's the Su-37. You know, I don't know. I don't know why the numbers always puzzled me as a kid. Most of them have zero significance at all.
Yeah. You always wonder what the P-52 was like, if there was a P-52. Yeah. There was a P-55, the Ascender.
Really?
That's the one I showed you with that weird, that had the engine in the back. Yeah. Also known as the Ascender by some of the people who flew it. And it was an incredibly dangerous plane that did not work.
Yeah, it's like the Shinden that the Japanese had. Apparently, it's in the Godzilla -1 movie. I really want to watch that movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We looked up the details of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a very similar plane in Wings of Onimise. Good movie.
Never seen it.
What a surprise. It's a Japanese animated movie, so I wouldn't expect you to have seen it.
No. So Kasserine, Americans are scattered. They're driven back, but it's a tactical victory more than strategic, although it causes Lloyd Friedendahl, who is hiding basically in this cave fortress, which is his headquarters 40 miles behind the line, relieved by Eisenhower and replaced by your boy, George Patton. That's the beginning of the movie. Patton is when he's coming to take over Second Corps. And he fights at El Guitar. He wins a victory against the Germans. Eventually, he then gets actually booted out of that even before the end of the campaign to go plan for the invasion of Sicily, and Omar Bradley takes over, the GI general.
The GI general, yeah.
And basically, Montgomery attacks from the south. It was actually technically the Second Corps was part of the British First Army. The first American maneuver army that's activated in Europe is actually the Seventh Army that doesn't even go into action until the invasion of Sicily. But I digress. Ultimately, the Axis get bunched up tighter and tighter in Tunisia, and they're eventually expelled in early May of 43. I think it's May 12th or May 7th. I can't remember exactly.
And it's apt that you say the Axis, because the Italians are also involved in North Africa.
Yes. Marshal Benito Mussolini doing his best.
Duce.
Well, the thing is, the Italians actually fought better than people gave them credit for. It's just that they had terrible leadership.
Yeah.
And when your leader is like a cartoon character.
Well, it's kind of affected by the future when they immediately stop fighting the moment that Allied boots step on Italian soil. It's like
Italian. They fought in Sicily.
That's true. They fought in
much.
Sicily. Yes.
The Germans are taking over.
Are you implying that Sicily is not sacred Italian soil?
I'm not.
How dare you say
it's
such
a lovely place. I've actually been. It is a really cool place. Great seafood if you like seafood.
Yeah.
There's some really cool stuff there.
I really liked when Robert Conquest was flying a mission over Sicily. That was really good.
That's right. August of 45 against his Me-262s. Oh, wait.
Yeah, screening the as a distraction against the atomic attack on Berlin.
Yeah.
I love these things that really happened in real life. It's great.
He uses a P-47N in that, which shows up in several of those stories. That's the long-range version. That was the main issue why the Mustang becomes predominant in the European theater, and actually eventually at the very end of the war in the Pacific, is its long range. Well, the P-47N, which is the last model used, actually fixed that and had just as long a range as the Mustang. But it came into action too late. It saw a little bit of action at the end of the war in the Pacific, but not in Europe.
Why is that? A bigger fuel tank, more efficient components?
I believe it used the wet wing principle, which is it's a way of storing fuel in the wing that was kind of innovative for the time, that gave it longer range. I think maybe something with the engine. I'm not an engineer by training, so I don't know for sure. I can't remember. But
you just dabble in aeronautics.
I just dabble in it. That's right. I just take over flying the plane sometimes when I'm on a flight. Oh, stand aside, pilot. Captain Matt is going to fly this.
I'd like to get a little bit more practice, a few more flying hours. In
my Microsoft flight simulator wasn't enough.
I've played Ace Combat 7, so I think I know everything there is to know.
If you crash, you just respawn. It's all good.
You're like, where's the lasers on this? Where's my missiles?
You probably actually could fly a plane. It's the landing part that's not. But guess what? That's the most important part. Okay, so that's the end of the North African campaign. Let's talk about maybe some potential scenarios. I'd like to go back briefly to pre-Torch.
Okay.
Some pre-Torch stuff, if you don't mind. I know
please do.
Wrote down some. So we didn't talk about the whole of the North Africa campaign, but I want to start with some scenarios. So, and obviously you all know the basics. What happens is Italy invades first Egypt in 1940. Britain launches Operation Compass, this massive counterattack that crushes the Italians, drives them back. The Africa Corps comes into action. Rommel and the British kind of push each other back and forth until June of 1942, when there's a large offensive at Gazala in Libya that unhooks most of the British line, pushes them back all the way to El-Alamein. There's some ferocious fighting, first battle of El-Alamein, and at Alam Halfa, that's where Bernard Montgomery comes into play. They stop them. Then the Battle of El-Alamein, second Battle of El-Alamein, October, November 1942, where the British defeat the Germans, drive them back, and then eventually link up in southern Tunisia with the remaining of the Allied forces. It's a very broad sweep of it. But it's, as we talk about why is the Mediterranean important, is that from 1940 to 1943, really 1944, it's the only field in which the Allies Western Allies are engaging the Germans in combat.
There's North Africa, and then there's island combat too, Crete and stuff like that. But we'll get to that later.
Yeah, I mean, this is the only place the Western Allies are fighting the Germans on the ground.
Oh, wait a second. There's also Norway too, right?
That was in 1940. That was pre the invasion of France. That's like April 40.
This is true.
It was the disaster there that toppled the Chamberlain government just in time for Churchill to become prime minister on the day France gets invaded.
Yay.
So, some scenarios about broader North Africa. What if Britain wins a complete victory over the Italians in late 1940, 1941? So basically, it was this counterattack launched in Egypt, drives the Italians back into Libya, and it eventually ends at a battle of Beta Foam, which this crushing victory over the Italians. But ultimately, Africa Corps comes into play, launches a counterattack, and kind of stabilizes it. What if the British win a wholesale victory? And they captured tens of thousands, if not 100,000 Italian prisoners in this. The number of British casualties versus the number of Italian if captured is like one of the most lopsided in history. It's crazy. I mean, the Italian army in Libya was massive, but it gets its ass kicked by the British.
Now, where did those POWs go, by the way? Because that's a lot of people.
Egypt, I don't know, Syria. Not Syria, not yet, because Syria is Vichy French. I don't know, Transjordan. Probably Egypt.
Weird question, but did any of them end up fighting in expeditionary forces against the Germans in Italy? Or
maybe later. I don't know.
Maybe later. Okay. Just curious. That's a lot of people that just are not contributing.
You're just sitting there.
Yeah.
But so what if this is a wholesale victory? What if the Africa Corps isn't sent? What if it comes too late? What if it's even more under strength than it was? What if Rommel's not the head of it? What if Rommel gets they say, we've got this giant invasion of the Soviet Union coming up. We need you to command some panzer division on the Eastern Front, where I'm sure he would have done fine. But what if we send someone else? Guderian. Yeah.
Somebody.
Yeah, exactly. Someone else goes. What if they're less competent or less lucky? What happens next? So let's call it by mid-1941, Libya has been conquered. Whatever forces have been driven out there, that leaves all that's left in North Africa is Vichy French territory. What is the next step? What does Britain do next? Does it conquer Vichy French North Africa? What happens? If the U.S. gets
so no amphibious landing necessary, just like an overland campaign.
Yeah, an overland campaign through Tunisia, and are the Vichy French at this point? Britain must be very emboldened and aggressive. What's it going to do? Let's say it conquers out Vichy French Northwest Africa, which leaves probably by 1942 the entire of the North African littoral is under British control. And Britain also learned a lot from its early defeats in the desert. So here are they like hyper aggressive, like Crusader tanks, best tanks ever invented. More M3 Lees, please. More M3 Grants, actually, is what the British use, but still.
Exactly, yes.
More.
Matilda, yes.
Yes. Won't you come waltzing with me as we crush these Vichy French FT-17 Renaults with our Matilda tanks?
With these Char Bs as we crush them beneath our much smaller tanks, yes.
So let's say the U.S. gets involved. What happens next if North Africa is conquered? Is torch a landing in Crete or Sicily?
Or in Africa. Central Africa, around the Vichy areas down there.
Let's turn south. We're driving into
Brazzaville,
Senegal, Chad,
Dakar. Yes,
that's right. I remember there's some sort of split where it was French Equatorial Africa was Free French, but French West Africa was Vichy.
I think that's right. Yeah, Jan Bokassa, the future emperor of the Central African Empire. He fought as a French colonial troop in Anvil Dragoon, I think.
Gave him a inflated ego, to say the least.
But he part of Equatorial Africa, pretty sure, I think.
So does the U.S. do this, or is the U.S. really gung-ho about a cross-channel attack? Because remember, this is what General Marshall wants, a cross-channel attack in 1942. That's what he said, and it's the British only managed to kind of push it off to 43, and eventually, because of Torch, it gets pushed to 44. But are the Americans like, okay, you conquered North Africa, we're all good, time to land in France?
Is this post-Dieppe raid at this point?
It's pre. And who knows if it even happens in a world like this.
Right, exactly. Amphibious landings are very, very, very difficult. Very difficult. And the Normandy landings happened in 44, and that was after years of buildup, years of training, years of planning. So just going into it willy-nilly is probably not a smart move. Though, I think you mentioned earlier that would be a lot less fortifications, but it could be potentially absolutely disastrous because you're fighting with people who they're completely unprepared for the battle ahead of them. So, I mean, I would imagine rushing into a Normandy-style invasion potentially being a complete disaster. But maybe the Allies can afford to have a huge, horrible disaster. I mean, they survived so many terrible decisions that we're going to talk about in the future here. I mean, maybe an abortive landing that fails wouldn't be such a bad thing. They just go in again. But maybe that would be a politically dangerous thing. Like, for instance, you mentioned that the Chamberlain government failed because of Norway's failure and also the fall of France as well. So, I mean, maybe that's the end of the Churchill government there. A disastrous early cross-channel invasion that just goes horribly, and then you've got freaking, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I think the worry, that would be something I would say is that, you know, regardless of how gung-ho the U.S. High Command is for an invasion of France in 42 or 43, are the lessons that the United States learns fighting in North Africa, Sicily, and Italy, I think are absolutely vital to the success of the later landings, which we'll talk about in some later scenarios. Why landing in France probably is the clearest route to Germany and the easiest.
Yeah.
But I'll probably say this again later, but what I would say about the Mediterranean is that I cannot defend in some ways the way the campaign was conducted, but I will defend the fact that it was fought, at least up until June of 44, because those lessons the Americans learn are vital, because regardless of spirit or how desirous you are of landing in France, I feel like the United States landing in France in November of 1942 is a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Because you see all the if you read Army at Dawn, all the ridiculous mistakes the U.S. Army makes, but they make those mistakes in Tunisia and Algeria, where the Germans can't throw the Allies out of North Africa by this point. But U.S. troops landing, call it Dieppe or the Pas de Calais in 1942, with no prior combat experience whatsoever, was probably a recipe for disaster. And there's a book later, I think we'll review it at some point, Hitler Triumphant, and there's 2 early D-Day scenarios, and guess what? The Allies get their asses kicked in them because they're not ready for it.
Yeah.
So D-Day was probably good that it happened when it did. And if you read like in the book, If the Allies Had Fallen, there's one author who argues somewhat persuasively that an early D-Day could have worked, but I think it ignores the fact that Americans aren't ready. And by the way, all the things that would make an amphibious landing worse, like the Luftwaffe, have been severely degraded by June of 1944. Yes. Not so much by May of 1943.
Yes.
That year is crucial. That June of 43 to June of 44 is a very crucial year in the degradation of the German ability to fight. So, okay, so let's get back. We need to get back to North Africa, back to the sands. However, one more thing on this is that there is the main British general during this offensive is a guy named Richard O'Connor, who was one of the preeminent British generals of the early war. His leadership in armored fighting with the 7th Armored Division and its equivalents, the Desert Rats, it leads to this great success in Operation Compass. However, he is captured by a German patrol in early 1941, and he spends over 2.5 years as a prisoner of war until when Italy surrenders in September of 1943. A lot of their prisoners get released, including him, and he makes his way back to Allied lines, and he serves as a corps commander in Second Army, the British Second Army, in Normandy through the remainder of the Northwest European campaign.
It's absolutely crazy.
But he could have been the preeminent British general. What if he is the preeminent general other than Montgomery? He was much more aggressive than Montgomery was.
What's his social skills? Is he?
I don't know. It's hard to be worse in some ways than Monty was.
It is, which is why I asked.
So, he was had a very distinguished career in World War One, and we could have seen a Britain that has a much more aggressive leader in the Mediterranean or Northwest Europe. Now, Montgomery was a very good general in many ways. I think better than a lot of Americans give him credit for, but he just was such an ass at times. And I mean, he also was very conservative in what he did. Also born of the fact of a man who got shot in the chest by a sniper in 1914 on the Western Front, fought at the Somme and all these other battles, or who saw the mass slaughter of the Western Front. So it makes sense that they weren't so eager to jump in.
Kind of reminds me of Freiberg a little bit. He's also a man who was injured grievously during the Great War.
Adrian Carton de Weert. Have you seen that guy? Adrian, he's the guy with like the eye patch, and he's like, I enjoyed World War One. Like, lost his arm, lost his eye, part of his ear was shot off. Apparently, he was shot in the arm, and it was useless. And the surgeon wouldn't remove part of his hand, so he just pulled some of his fingers off. Oh my God. Yeah. And apparently he told someone after, he's like, I quite enjoyed the war. He lost either part of his ear or his eye fighting the Mad Mullah in Somaliland.
Interesting.
Right before the war. He looks like a pirate. It's pretty great. He was really too old to have fought in World War II. He fought a little bit at the beginning.
So I'm familiar with the Mahdi. I'm not sure if I'm familiar with the Mad Mullah.
The Mad Mullah, he was a Somali religious / political leader who they fought in what's now really Somaliland, British Somaliland.
That's right. They're having their civil war there. Somaliland versus Somalia.
Yes. Versus Puntland. No. Versus what?
The Tigray Territorial Defense Front or whatever the hell it is.
He fought in Somaliland, and he fought in the Somaliland Camel Corps. One of his colleagues was, I told you his name earlier, Hastings Ismay, Pug Ismay, also known as Churchill's main personal military advisor in World War II.
Pug.
Pug Ismay. He does look like a pug.
Okay.
He looks like a tough guy. But he spent the whole of World War I fighting against the Mad Mullah in Somaliland rather than on the Western Front.
That's crazy.
But I think he sat on the Combined Joint Chiefs of Staff. Very interesting character, one that's forgotten, sort of like Alan Brooke, very, very important. Alan Brooke also had very strong opinions about most of the people he worked with, like Churchill, and they weren't great. Didn't love Monty either. That one's a little bit easier to...
Speaking of forgotten, you've talked about how Jumbo Wilson is often forgotten.
Henry Maitland Wilson, Supreme Allied Commander in the Mediterranean for a while.
Wait, you're telling me that he wasn't given the name Jumbo as his Christian name? I'm shocked by this news.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's get back again. Some other quick ones will fire off. What if Germany focuses on the Mediterranean instead of the Soviet Union? I think some people have posited this as if they had done this, could they have knocked Britain out of the war? And perhaps. But I think there's an issue with this, which is there's an ideological commitment of the Nazis to fight the Soviets, to fight Jewish Bolshevism.
Yeah.
That ultimately a conflict between the Nazis and so the Soviet Union was pretty much inevitable. And in some ways, Hitler saw the British as the most akin, that he really wanted to strike some sort of deal with them, give them part of their empire and make them go away, sort of thing like that, rather than fight them directly and try and win this total victory.
You know, it's kind of funny you say that because Joseph Stalin, before World War II, saw Britain as the Soviet Union's greatest enemy. It's like the old imperialist power. It's also a capitalist power. It's also this degrading power, and Germany is rising, and he saw like Germany as a natural ally for the Soviets.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Like,
where you got that from?
I don't know. Just like there's a great deal of dislike of Britain in Stalin's mind. So it's kind of funny that it's like Britain being like the main enemy of the Soviet Union and perhaps the main ally of the Germans, like in ideologically, theoretically speaking. But no.
Yeah, no, they wouldn't give in. I mean, and that is one of their great contributions to the Second World War, is buying that time.
Yeah, Andrew Roberts has said that like Britain bought the time, America brought the guns, and the Soviet Union brought the blood.
Yeah. I think that's it is a broad characterization, but that year, the fact that Britain holds from June of 40 to June of 41 by itself is really a vital, vital year.
Yeah.
And it buys that extra time. And also to get the United States more in a position to be ready once Pearl Harbor actually happens.
So theoretically speaking, what would Germany be doing in the Mediterranean to push the British out?
Just throwing all of its forces to basically, instead of being the Africa Corps, be like an army group worth of troops. Try and land in Cyprus, drive through the Middle East, capture oil fields in Iraq.
Maybe try to land in Malta, perhaps?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Malta. Overwhelm Malta.
The unsinkable aircraft carrier.
That's
Malta.
right. The whole island got a George Cross.
That's right. Yeah.
So I just don't know if this is going to happen in 41, because I feel like once France is defeated and Hitler feels like his flank is reasonably secure, all eyes are going to the Soviet Union. It just,
and frankly, that's where they deserve to be, because the Soviet Union, it's so powerful. Like distracting yourself is just asking for trouble, asking for problems.
Yeah. So let's move on. Okay, what if Rommel wins a total victory in 41 or 42? Rommel wins these tactical victories and pushes the British back and forth, but he never wins a strategic victory. Why? Because the Africa Corps really kind of was a corps.
Yeah, it was very tiny.
It was tiny, maybe 3 or 4 German divisions. I know 90th Light Division, 15th and 21st Panzer, I think. Maybe there was one other. But a lot of Italian units. But I know it wasn't technically by the time of El-Alamein, it's not the Africa Corps, it's the Panzer Armee Africa or something like that.
Okay.
And the Africa Corps is a subordinate unit within it. But regardless, is that if Rommel wins a total victory, let's call it at Gazala in 1942, he cuts off the British army and smashes it. Well, or at the First Battle of El-Alamein, he somehow makes his way through, captures Alexandria and Cairo. Do the Germans even have enough strength to carry this out? Can they hold what they've won? It's not about just winning the battle. It's about holding the territory.
Also imagine processing the prisoners, all the POWs and stuff. Where do they go? Who takes care of them?
And the German supply lines were always stretched to the breaking point. Because Malta is sitting there, which interdicts a lot of that traffic. But also, most of these supplies are brought into Benghazi, Tripoli, or Tobruk. And they have to make their way 1,000 miles practically by truck to, when they're at El-Alamein. So this is really the shoestring. I mean, there is times when the Africa Corps has literally 20 operable tanks.
And transporting anything by truck, any distance, is wildly inefficient. Using trains is so much better, but it's not really an option in a lot of cases.
Not in North Africa, it wasn't. Not for Rommel. So they're always kind of on the shoestring. And I guess he wins these great victories. So if he wins this great victory, so what? He finds himself in possession of Cairo and Alexandria.
Now your supply lines are way longer now as well.
And what are you doing next? Are you driving on the Iraqi oil fields? Can you even capture the Iraqi oil fields? Because now you're really fucking far from Benghazi and Tripoli. I mean,
this is very true.
I mean, and the British, remember, the 8th Army was significantly reinforced between the summer of 42 and the beginning of the El-Alamein offensive. A lot of those troops now are not going to be lost at the desert. They're not going to go to reinforce other areas.
And well, let's just say hypothetically that all these resources that made going on the Iraqi oil fields was sacrificed from the Eastern Front. So let's just say that it is possible. What happens next? Britain goes up from Sudan, goes up from Ethiopia or whatever, and then goes north, I guess.
Yeah. What instead are they going to tell Rommel go down the Nile? I had an idea for a story. I remember called Patton of Khartoum, and it was going to be October of 43, and Rommel's in Khartoum, and here comes George Patton in to save the day, and Adrian Carton de Wiart is actually the British commander in it. I did the sketch of the story, I never wrote it. It was me goofy, I was going to have Rommel be at times comment, why am I here? I am 800 miles up the Nile from Cairo. What are we doing here?
Or, alternatively.
And why didn't we go if we're going to do that, why didn't we go to the Iraqi oil fields?
Let's say alternatively from that, how about the Soviets go south through Persia to interdict them there?
Exactly. The Allies aren't going to just let those oil fields fall without a fight.
No.
So we have this victory, but at worst, so they hold Egypt. They shut down the Suez Canal. Okay, that's a big problem. Malta's super isolated. Also a problem. Are the British just going to build up enough strength in the Middle East and Sudan, or maybe, just maybe, torch will also happen and the Allies will just reconquer Africa coming from the opposite direction? And why not? I mean, why not? We've got all these American and all these British troops that were never lost, that were never sent for El-Alamein. So, why don't we land them at Torch and we'll just liberate Africa the old-fashioned way, the reverse direction?
Well, and also, let's say, what if Americans are sent to El-Alamein, for instance?
Yeah.
That's another thing you can throw in there.
Yeah, because here's the thing is that there were American air forces operating in Egypt, bomber and fighter squadrons, but no ground troops at El-Alamein. But what if they sent some? What difference does that make?
Well, why didn't they? Is it just they were so inexperienced it would be more of a liability?
It was also took time to mobilize. It's much easier to send a group of planes overseas to an air base than it is to ship a division.
Yeah, this is true.
And also remember, the U.S. is still building its army. And also they're worried about the Pacific at this point.
That's another great point.
So, and until we land at Guadalcanal, like, who knows? I mean, because we're all thinking of this in our heads. We know kind of the whole, how it plays out. Yeah. But if it's June of 1942 and you're in the American High Command, okay, so you've just won at Midway. But the Japanese they're down, but they're not out. I mean, and you're thinking about launching an offensive. But by the way, you've got them driving in New Guinea and the Australians barely holding on. Maybe we need to save up some troops to send to Australia. God forbid it gets invaded.
We'll get into this later a little bit, but one bugaboo of the U.S. Navy was the fact that we were sending all these LSTs to the Mediterranean to be used in these amphibious operations there. And they're like, God, I wish we had these for our island hopping. We could be hopping so many more islands right now if we just had some more LSTs.
That's right. I mean, there's that, because the Navy, for them, the war is primarily fought in the Pacific. And
just ask Ernest King, and he'll tell you what's important.
Yeah, that's right. He'll tell you. Yeah, he will. He'll tell you all
He'll tell you all kinds of things. About British people, for instance.
Yeah, he's got some interesting ideas he'd like to inform you about. Okay, so this stretches out the war, and we'll just bring up this point that will be repeated in several of these stories. If the Allied war effort rolls along at the same pace that it does in reality, in our timeline, you could say, Germany has an expiration date, I think. And I think that expiration date may or may not be somewhere on or around August 6th of 1945. Because guess what? We're still developing the atomic bomb. And maybe, just maybe, when we started building it, we thought we were going to use it against Germany.
That's expounded upon quite a bit in this obscure indie film called Oppenheimer. Have you heard of this? Have you seen this?
No, I heard of the Barbie movie, but not Oppenheimer.
Yeah. Far inferior to the Barbie movie. I saw both movies in theaters.
I've not yet seen either.
I would say you don't have to watch Barbie. It's but you do have to watch Oppenheimer. Absolutely. It is a excellent film, in my opinion.
It'll inspire me to become Cillian Murphy.
Oh, I think it's Cillian Murphy.
Is it Cillian?
Yeah.
Damn, forgive me.
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan's going to rappel in and just shoot me right now. Oh, no, actually spray me with scarecrow gas from the first Batman Begins movie and make me crazy.
Yeah. And also the third Batman movie. He's in the third one, remember?
Yes, he is. Yeah.
What a film.
Yes. Oh, it's a great
Bane.
movie. Let me do this weird Sean Connery. I was born into the darkness. You were merely blah, 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 blah. You in Mad Max Fury Road.
For you. They're making a new Mad Max now.
Yeah, I saw the commercial for it. Looked pretty good.
I'll watch it. Looks good to me.
Seemed like a fine film to me.
Yeah. Mr. George Miller, he knows what he's doing.
He does know what he's doing.
Yeah. Happy Feet, a masterpiece.
Yes, that's right. So, okay. Next, what if Malta falls in 41 or 42? What if the Germans actually take the time to try and capture the island? does it increase supplies to North Africa? Is that enough for the Germans to win? I don't know. Maybe the issue is later on the Allies have to land on Malta and recapture the island. Maybe this slows down the liberation of Italy, throws a campaign off by a few months, because you got to land in Malta. You got to take Malta first before you can land on Italy. It's too much of a threat to your flank.
Remind me, when was the invasion of Crete by the Germans?
May of 41.
May of 41. So this is kind of around that same time period. I was there, Omar. I was there.
Remember me, George? I love that line. Sitting Bull.
I'm back.
I'm back.
I was also born 50 years later for no reason.
And in Germany for some apparent reason.
And I'm also blonde-haired and blue.
Honestly, that story would have been great if they just made him the grandson of Custer. If that had been George Custer III and they tweaked it a little bit and he's trying to live up to his grandfather's reputation or save it, like, that story would have been awesome.
One wonders why.
But instead, we got the weird dislocated in time thing that just makes no sense.
It's like in the freaking settling accounts where Woodward and Bernstein show up. Why? Why did you do this, Harry? Come on. Give me a break.
He was just having fun.
Yes, he was.
I was just having
and
fun.
That's wrong. That's incorrect.
You're not allowed to have fun, Harry. Write more. No fun for you.
How dare you? I don't know if I've talked about this on an episode, but in the Hot War books, which I've also read, and they're fine. They're good. I like them. But in, I think, the last one of the characters from MASH shows up. Like Hawkeye shows up. Like
Alan Alda.
What are you doing, fam? Come on. What's next? You're going to have Jaws happen in one of your books? Like freaking your good friend?
Sam Karsten is looking out off the ship, and here comes this giant shark.
I remember when the Josephus Daniels sank and the sharks were eating everyone. Come on, Harry. Come on.
Might as well talk about, we're going to see this new band, Milli Vanilli. My favorite band, by the way.
I've often thought about writing an alternate history story that's pretty straight-laced, but then working in bizarre little weird jokes and references to things.
Yeah,
like,
why not?
Like mentioning who's the current WWE champion at the time or something, and it's someone wildly different or something goofy like that.
Hollywood Hogan.
Yeah, Mark Jindrak is the biggest star ever, I don't know.
It's Hulk Hogan who runs the WWE, and Vince McMahon is a wrestler.
Did you know that he ran for president at one point, Hulk Hogan?
Really?
Yeah, I think it was a perfunctory campaign.
Duh.
Believe it or not, I don't think it was a serious effort to become president of the United States.
Well, Jesse Ventura did become Can you imagine being in Minnesota from 1999 to 2003 and you're watching The Running Man and your governor comes out and is like, "I'm not wearing this, Killian," this ridiculous
this shiny chrome suit.
Back in my day, I was killing guys like this with my bare hands. I don't need these stupid tricks.
Okay, now let's talk about tax cuts. I was watching The Running Man the other day. Great movie. Mwah.
It is a great movie.
What a great 80s movie. That's such an 80s movie.
Who loves you and who do you love? Yeah.
Last year's winners.
I think you mean
last year's losers. So much about that movie doesn't make sense.
Is that
Sub-Zero, no Plane Zero.
No Plane Zero. Was that Jim Brown, Firebug?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, classic. Of
Fireball.
The Dirty Dozen fame. Fireball,
was, yes.
Sorry.
You watched that movie recently.
Yeah, with my grandfather.
It's a fine movie.
Yes, it's a fine film. And my sister as well. I liked it. I gotta say, the character of Telly Savalas drove me crazy watching the movie. Like, why are you bringing this guy?
Let's bring this lunatic serial killer with us and give him a gun.
Who's like talking about how God tells him to like punish
prostitutes.
Yeah, prostitutes and stuff. Like, what did you expect was going to happen?
Yeah.
We've got some of the most ruthless operators. We've got this guy. We got Dick Marcinko and this other guy, and then Jeffrey Dahmer is on the mission as well. Like, what?
There wasn't anyone else you could have think of who knows how to kill people other than the lunatic serial killer to take you on your mission with you and give them weapons?
I mean, if they said, oh, he's the only guy who can speak German, or oh, he's a demolitions expert.
Yeah, he's the only guy who knows how to work the demolitions.
But the way-
guess what? He does exactly what you'd think the lunatic with the machine gun does is he turns on them.
He sees a woman and kills her, and then just starts shooting everybody like almost like he's some kind of crazy person or something.
Huh, wow. It is a good movie. And you did point out there's a lot of like, oh, the American guy shoots some Germans, then a German shoots that American guy, then another American shoots that German guy.
A little formulaic at the end when all the guys get... Spoiler alert, the Dirty Dozen, only one of them survives, Charles Bronson.
Yeah, the two other ones are like non-Dirty Dozen.
Yeah, there's...
Lee Marvin.
Yeah.
Major Reisman.
Right, yeah.
And the other guy.
The other guy, I can't remember who he
who's
was.
in a lot of World War II movies. I forget his name.
Was he, so Lee Marvin,
Richard
obviously.
Jekyll is the actor's name.
Jekyll.
Yeah.
Interesting. Huh.
He was in The Devil's Brigade.
I haven't seen this one.
It's a good movie. It's about Italy, actually.
Is it really?
Yeah, Italy and France, yeah.
You know what else is? Inglourious Bastards, the original one.
Is it?
Yeah. With our good friend, the man that we saw at that convention, Fred Williamson.
Williamson.
He's in that film, yeah.
What a guy. God, he was so funny.
He was hilarious.
He was a character. Like,
saying bad things about Selma Hayek.
yeah.
Remember that? How she needed to shower more?
No, it was Juliette Lewis, I think.
Juliette Lewis, really?
Yeah, I think.
Huh.
It was one of the two. I can't remember. But he was talking about being in From Dusk Till Dawn. It was pretty hilarious.
Yeah, very funny.
He's a great guy. Very funny.
He even talked about Charles Bronson, too. He said that as I'm getting older, I get bigger and bigger guns, just like Charles Bronson, you know? Like, you got the first Death Wish, and he's just got a pistol. And then the second Death Wish, he's got a little bit bigger pistol. Third Death Wish, he's got a freaking Magnum Wild E, and he's got a machine gun. And then, go up to rocket launcher. Like,
which is true. It's actually a fair point.
He moves less and less, and the guns get bigger and bigger.
Yeah, just like how Steven Seagal moves less and less.
Yeah, yes, he does.
There's a great on YouTube, another great Talkernate history tangent we're on. But there's a great video on YouTube where an actor talks at Stephen Tobolowsky, who's like the bad guy in The Glimmer Man, talks about being in that movie with Steven Seagal, and it's just he's like he's like the B bad guy. He's not the main bad guy, but he's like he talks about it's like a 5 or 6 minute video, and it is hilarious. I'm talking about. I think I sent it to you.
I've seen it, and it is so funny. It is hysterical. I highly recommend everyone see it.
Talk about like trying to work around like all the insanity on the set.
Steven Seagal, he's somebody that I think people have really soured on over time for good reason, because he's a ridiculous character. I mean,
but he moves less and less, and the bad guys fly farther and farther.
He's in like a movie, I think it's called Sniper Elite, with freaking Rob Van Dam, bizarrely, and he is, I don't want to be mean, but he's maybe not physically equipped to be a hardcore operator in Afghanistan / Iraq / unnamed
Middle Eastern country.
He looks absurd in that movie.
Oh man, good old Steven Seagal.
Yeah.
Okay, up next. Let's see. What if Mark Clark is killed or captured in his pre-torch mission?
Yeah, the one where he got in that boat and went ashore to talk to Darlan / Darlan's men.
Yeah, if that would be a huge change on the Italian campaign, and we'll probably flush this out more when we talk about his role in the Italian campaign, but he was, the Italian campaign, for better or worse, but a little bit of both, is shaped by him in so many ways.
And we will get into this more, but like Mark Clark, he's really marred by a single big mistake in his career.
His last name and his first name end on the same.
Yeah.
Mark Clark.
Come on, man.
Mark Wayne Clark.
Come on.
Mark Clark.
I think they call him Marcus Aurelius Clarkus or something.
That's kind of accurate.
That's like his nickname. A major failing surrounding taking Rome, and a lesser failing of just being a little bit of an egomaniac. But it's telling that those are the two things people really criticize him for, because he's actually an excellent general. Other than that, he's very competent. He's very good. But
and we'll talk about this later, but I don't know, given that terrain and the circumstances the Allies found themselves in, that any other general faced with those similar sorts of conditions, capturing Cassino, bursting through the Gustav Line, the Rapido River. These would have challenged a lot of generals. So
Yes.
there may be a way around that, which we'll talk about later, but unlikely given those circumstances. So I don't know. And I think a lot of historians will say his faults were not necessarily in his combat leading.
Yeah.
It's his personality. There's a lot of issues. And that the whole Rome thing, which we'll talk about, which Atkinson really harps on about that decision, but we'll get to it in a minute.
And he would have a long career too.
He was the Supreme Allied Commander in Korea at one point.
At one point, I think near the end. He was.
Matthew Ridgway was at one point.
Yes, he was.
James Van Fleet was.
Yeah.
But he also then later became the president of the Citadel, the military college of South Carolina.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. But he's not. Did he go to VMI or
No, I think he went to West Point.
West Point? Okay.
Not all. I mean, George Marshall wasn't a West Point grad, but most of the senior brass at the time were West Point grads. Bradley, Eisenhower, MacArthur. Yeah, MacArthur. I said McClarker.
McClarker.
Oh God, they've merged. Oh no.
Mark Patton.
It's like some Sliders episode. Oh no, we've merged. We've merged them together.
David, Mark Eisenhower, Clarkenhauer.
So let's get on. Next one. What if Operation Torch failed?
Yeah. Once again,
I recommend to you highly a story written by a very competent, highly skilled, and somewhat handsome author. Myself.
You're selling yourself short on the handsomeness. Everything else is completely untrue. Yes. You wrote a series of
some of the ace stories are set in a torch failed world, and I think we hinted at about I wrote a Billy Mitchell's overt act style about the failure of Torch. But let's step away from that.
Yeah.
I know I'm submitting that. I expect my Pulitzer to come any day now.
By the way, we should somehow make that available to people to read, because some people have requested
Yes,
this.
we will. We'll find a way to make that available.
Also, the Schwarzkopf working for the Iraqi story, which is a delightful tale, I gotta say.
Those were fun. Those were fun to write.
Yeah.
I liked writing the Torch one. I got to make more headway on the Montgomery and Patton switch one. So let's get back. What if Operation Torch fails? How could this happen? Is this even possible, Max?
It is possible, because we had no idea what we were doing. But so the fact that we're fighting the Vichy French helps a bit. They were formidable. They did fight, but they were not as dedicated to the cause as Germans are. If we were instead fighting German-held territory primarily initially, then maybe things would be a little bit different, instead of attacking the Vichy first.
Yeah, I guess what if the Germans send troops to the Vichy, I guess? Maybe that helps repel it.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, I just don't see. I mean, the Vichy fight hard, but I don't know if they could repulse all landings. Like, okay, maybe they repulse the landings in Algeria, but I feel like Morocco will still.
Maybe we rub Darlan the wrong way, and he decides, no, I'm going to fight to the last. I'm going to resist as hard as I possibly can, and then he gets killed by his own troops.
He was murdered shortly after the landings in North Africa. He was killed by a French monarchist. Killed him for some unknown reason.
I don't get into a lot of conspiracy theories, but one of the conspiracy theories that I find a little bit persuasive is Eisenhower allowed this man to be murdered by this monarchist. That's one of them.
Yeah, you could understand why they'd want it, because the deal they had to cut meant that the Vichy government, including all of its laws, including its anti-Semitic laws, had to stay in place.
Yes, in the occupied northern African areas.
And a lot of people really didn't like that.
For very understandable reasons, especially the Jews who were living in the area.
Yeah.
Wanted to move back to the area also.
Yeah, I mean, why did we cut this deal with the Vichy?
And before the creation of the State of Israel, there were a lot of Jews who lived in North Africa.
Mm-hmm. Tons, yeah. No, Morocco and Algeria. So, I mean, and also people were just like, these people were allied with the Germans, and we cut
until
this deal,
5 minutes
and we
ago.
were literally fighting them. I mean, American troops.
Yeah.
There were American troops killed by Vichy French soldiers in Operation Torch. Yeah,
yeah.
Not an insane amount, but a good number, a large number. It wasn't 5 casualties.
They didn't make it easy.
No, they didn't.
Yeah.
But we taught them, or I guess they taught us in my Torch story with the unstoppable Charbies. Yes. So what happens next? Okay, so Operation Torch fails. Where did we go with this?
So when you say fails, you mean pushed back into the sea.
Let's go full. They're pushed back. Torches defeated in every way. In all ways, the Allies are driven. It's Dunkirk.
Yeah.
The Allies are driven into the sea.
Well, what happens next? Where do we go? What do we do? I don't know.
Does this change a lot? Is Rommel able to halt Montgomery at all? Maybe he isn't still. Maybe he still gets pushed back in Tunisia. So what does America do? Does the U.S. say, we'll give up on it? Let's just send ground forces to Egypt. So we'll double up on that approach and we'll just conquer North Africa from that direction. Or do we say double down on a cross-channel attack? I don't think so, because I feel like we say, let's do another even bigger, higher stakes landing. It'd also be a huge defeat for the U.S. and also would derail U.S. strategic priorities, because even by 1943, Britain becomes kind of is the tail wagging the dog a little bit. But in this world, if Torch is a disaster and the British are the only ones beating the Axis, are they going to say, you need to listen to us?
Yeah, you're going to be part of a British army, just a smaller section of it, or the entirety of it. We're just in charge. We're the brain in charge of the thing.
Yes. You send your troops to go there, but the real brains behind this operation, Jumbo Wilson.
This jumbo brain.
Pulling all the strings. So, and then here also, what happens to Eisenhower in this world? Is he cashiered? Maybe, yeah. He was extremely lucky to be in the position that he was in. They called him divine. I think Patton called him Divine Destiny Eisenhower, D.D. Eisenhower, David Dwight. Just because Dwight David. I'm so sorry. You're right. Well, it actually is David Dwight. That actually was his birth name, but he went by Dwight David.
Yeah.
We're seeing the popularity of the show The Office by 120 years.
Yes. There's a podcast I like called 372 Pages We'll Never Get Back. It's a podcast about bad books. One of them was written by this guy named Dwight David Thrash, who's this accountant who appears to be completely insane. And he wrote this book about a team of accountants who are solving a mystery, except no real solving of a mystery. It's hard to explain, but it is truly the work of a unique mind. But so sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay, so does Eisenhower get kicked out? You wonder, perhaps. I mean, perhaps Marshall can protect him and maybe blame the British or throw Friedendahl. Well, actually, Friedendahl wasn't really involved in the Torch landings, and that's one of the reasons why it fails in my Torch fail story is he's given command of the operation.
Do you think there's a circumstance where a commander fails so badly that Marshall goes and takes a more hands-on role?
That's a great point. Does Marshall say, I'm needed at the front?
Yeah, instead of directing things from the continental United States to instead move there.
Which was his plan up until was it 6 months before D-Day or so? His plan was Marshall was going to give up his position as the chief of staff of the army, or not give up, but he was going to go to Europe and take direct operational control of D-Day.
That's crazy. Huh. I didn't know that.
And he only because I think Roosevelt convinced him, said, I need you here. I need you to direct the wider scope of the war, that he held back on that.
Okay. Well, who else in the United States?
Patton. No, just kidding. God, George C. Scott. I mean, Patton. I mean, oh, God. It's so confusing.
Mark Clark? Could he be in charge?
Oh, God. Yeah, Mark Clark. Douglas MacArthur. Do they bring him from this?
MacArthur.
Talk about coalition warfare. A world in which Douglas MacArthur and Bernard Montgomery can occupy the same space is...
No, sorry. He's in a prison camp in occupied Philippines. He's not able to join us here today. That William Sanders short story, I can't remember the name of it, but...
Not Fade Away.
Not Fade Away. That's a good one. I like that one a lot.
So yeah, who does replace? Or maybe he isn't replaced. Maybe, or Marshall makes him his deputy and he takes direct control. Long term, though, does this feel like eventually this is going to probably derail D-Day from happening in June of 44, which probably means an atomic bomb is going to get dropped in Germany in 45. That's the end of a lot of these stories, is that if the war continues on very far and Germany's in a strong position, they're just going to drop an A-bomb on them.
Yeah.
Okay, well, next, what if the North African campaign lasts until 44 or 45? Because in my story, it lasts until January of 1945.
The third battle of El-Alamein.
Dude, there's a third battle of El-Alamein in May, June 1944. I love it. It's so much fun. And it's fun to write East stories in that because it's,
it's also because apparently every single nation has invested so much into planes that the ground combat is just not that important. because people are going on sorties and shooting down like 8 planes.
Well, no, yeah, they all shoot down. That was like one of the things as I went farther into the stories, I'm like, I got to make this more ridiculous. So all of them are not just aces, but they're shooting down 25, 30, 35 planes. The Germans are just getting massacred. They're just getting shot down left and right.
One of my favorite ones was a guy flies into a Japanese training airfield and there's a bunch of trainers all over the place and he just shoots them all down.
Oh, yeah. Sanford Motes, who,
Sanford
as of
Motes.
the writing of this story, does appear. He's one of the last living American World War II aces. Yeah, that's a P-47N. Remember
Yeah.
Pearl Harbor. That's what it's called. Yeah, and he's flying over a Japanese airfield in Korea at the end of the war. And there's just a bunch of Japanese like air trainers, planes flying. And he's like, okay, woo, goes down and shoots down. I think, is it 6 or 7? 6 or it's just fish in a barrel, just lines one up. They don't have any armament. And this is my revenge for Pearl Harbor, just shooting them all down.
At first I felt a pang of pity for these people, but then I remembered those poor sailors there on December 7th. Cuba Gooding Jr., I gotta avenge
His career.
avenge your career. Snow dogs, never forget snow dogs. Radio.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my goodness. So yes. So I guess if Torch fails, that's the way North Africa lasts until that point. How would a significant delay like this affect the rest of the war? Probably the atomic strike ending it. The USSR. How is Russia taking all this, Max?
Yeah, well, that's another good question too, because a complete disaster in the Mediterranean would really raise some eyebrows in the Soviet Union, wondering like, what the hell are you doing? And also, we're going to get to the question of Italy here soon, and
We're almost done with North Africa. Yep.
a big question people have is that we shouldn't have gone to Italy in the first place. That like, oh, we should have just bypassed it, landed in France, don't do anything in Italy, or land in the freaking Yugoslavia or something like that, but just ignore Italy. But like, I don't know if the Soviets would have tolerated the United States and Britain and all the other allies just sitting around in North Africa waiting until, the next invasion.
Yeah, for a year.
Yeah, for a year, doing nothing.
But air attacks.
But air attacks, yes. I mean, don't get me wrong. A lot of the air attacks are important. A lot of people died in the air, but they want troops on the ground. They want like lines on maps getting bigger and bigger, blobs moving across the continent.
They want German ground forces shifted from the Eastern
Yes.
Front to the West.
Because double-digit divisions diverted from the Eastern Front is what Stalin wants. And you're just not going to get that farting around on islands in the Mediterranean or in North Africa. Some kind of invasion is very, very highly sought by the Soviets.
Particularly in France, and they want it in France. They're the biggest fans of a second front.
Yeah.
Because they know that, North Africa is just not consuming enough of the German men and materiel.
And also, Rick Atkinson talks about at the very end of Day of Battle, talks about how Britain was kind of overloaded with soldiers in the time before D-Day. So like the year before D-Day, there's just a crap load of American and British soldiers preparing to do a cross-channel invasion. And all the guys in North Africa and the Mediterranean, I mean, there's just no room to put these people in Britain.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to cubbyhole them somewhere to do something while the cross-channel invasion is being worked up to. So it makes sense to put them somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and it's as I said earlier about you have to be doing something because the Soviets are every day that you just sit there doing nothing but launching bombing raids.
Yeah,
It seems like maybe you're just hoping the Soviets and the Germans destroy each other and then you come in and mop up what's left.
And you've got like Molotov constantly guilt tripping Roosevelt and everyone else at every conference they go to, saying, are you going to invade France yet? Are you going to do this yet?
So, yeah, it probably portends worse Soviet-Western ally relations if the North Africa campaign's dragging on, so it's not absorbing a significant portion of German troops in the way it should.
Then again, if you're somehow having a third battle of El-Alamein, maybe it's because the Germans are being siphoned off.
I think it's kind of hinted in the story that the Germans do increase their forces, but it's not to the scale they'd be using in France or anything like that. So.
Yeah. The war is going oddly similar apart from that. There's not, wild, crazy swings happening.
Yeah, that's the fun of it. It's supposed to be ridiculous. It's supposed to be insane. It's supposed to have all these Jimmy Carter and Mel Brooks. There's some other ones that
Bob
are just
Barker and
I did do a Bob Barker one.
Yeah.
Henry Kissinger.
Yeah, Hank Kissinger.
James Buckley. All these people keep dying, though. I write the story.
Yeah. We were talking about Charlie Munger in the previous episode, and then he died after we recorded it.
Yeah, but after I'd written the story, yeah. There's other people. If you just find other notable people from the time, but yeah, that's the whole point, is to be ridiculous. It's supposed to be over the top. Oh, Gene Shalit.
Yeah.
Justice is a thunderbolt. That's the one where he's like shooting down the German plane. And he's like, and I was aiming to kill the man in there. This is a good time to have a picture of Gene Shalit up and imagine this man flying a thunderbolt through the sky. That was a Torch one.
You could have written one with Gaston Glock as the main character, but unfortunately,
I saw that.
died.
Oh, Alan Greenspan.
Oh yeah, that was a good one too.
Yeah, he flies a jet.
He's up against. No, he's not against Japanese, is he?
No, against the Germans. That's a Torch one. That's the D-Day. That's the one where I sent it to you, and you're like, "What? D-Day happened in 45?
Oh, wait. Yes.
The P-80 shooting star story.
I love it.
So much fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll quickly hit last two small, minor diversions. What if the M4 Sherman ever replaced the M3 Lee? Which, of course, that would still happen because the M3 Lee, as we talked about earlier, crappy, shitty tank.
It's terrible.
Yeah, let's put lots of weight on narrow treads. Always works great. Then what if Strafer Gott is not killed in action in 1942? Well, after Claude Auchinleck is relieved after the disaster at Gazala, a commander by the name of, I think it was William Gott, but he was known as Strafer Gott, who was a long-term division and corps commander in North Africa.
Does Strafer mean attacker, flanker?
Yeah, Strafer. Yeah, he was aggressive. He was known to be very aggressive. Well, he was briefly 8th Army's commander before the plane he was in got shot down by the Germans. And Montgomery replaces him. Well, he was way more aggressive than Montgomery, and perhaps he would have shaped a different strategy at El-Alamein. Perhaps not a better one, because the whole point of El-Alamein is that Montgomery wears the Germans down enough that when they start retreating, they don't really stop retreating until they reach Tunisia, the Mareth line. So,
Right.
Okay.
But I guess we should move on to kind of the main event, as they say, and that's talking about Italy.
Yes. A fine place to go. I highly recommend Rome.
Now, would you say Italy or Spain or Portugal is the most superior place to go in the Mediterranean? Well, actually, Portugal's not in the Mediterranean, so never mind.
But it kind of is a Mediterranean country, despite the fact it does only sit on the Atlantic. It's in that same kind of...
Yeah.
Well, all depends on what you want to do. I haven't seen enough of Spain yet. I've been part of it. It's a really beautiful country. Sangria is fabulous. I like Italy a lot. Great food, great sights. Rome's a good city. I love Portugal. Portugal is really, really cool too. Really cheap and super nice people. And I don't know. I think Italy's the classic one. It's hard to beat because it's got history, food, and culture.
Yeah.
But Spain and Portugal are great to go to. So I highly recommend all. And this podcast brought to you by the Brothers of Italy. No, or what?
The Cosa Nostra, the official podcast of the Mafia. Visit Sicily. Beautiful Sicily, which you have been to.
Part of Sicily I was in for a decent chunk of it is the western part, which is like the whole heartland of the Mafia.
Yeah.
And they pass it off like the Mafia in some ways isn't there anymore, but they still are.
They definitely.
You should go if you're in
are.
Palermo. Go to the Norman Palace, because I sent you pictures when I was there of it has this beautiful Byzantine chapel in it, and there's it's this mixture of Norman, Italian, Greek, in Arabic, all in one. It's just crazy. It's just
an interesting confluence of peoples.
Yeah, in parts of Sicily they eat a lot of couscous, because that's just a thing they brought over, because it was an Islamic emirate at one point.
Yeah, and it was also ruled by the Normans as well for a time.
Yeah, and there's still a Norman influence. And
it's a bizarre mix of many different people.
It's a cool place. I highly recommend Rome, though. You have to go, and you have to do the Colosseum, the Pantheon, the Vatican, which I guess is its own country, which is crazy when you go. Its border is this movable barrier with Italy. You just walk over. There is no passport control. You just walk over, and there you are. Great place. And man, the food is so good.
Yeah, in the Vatican.
In the Vatican, yes. The food at the Vatican is so
the
good.
Benihana at the Vatican is just The Hard Rock Cafe at the
Sbarro.
Vatican. The Sbarro. The Godfather's Pizza at the Vatican is just
Herman
amazing.
Cain expanded to Italy. You know what? I'm going to show those Italians how to make pizza.
It's so authentic. Al Authentico. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, rustica. No, oh my god.
They didn't even have the tomato until the New World. Can you believe
didn't,
that?
no.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, no,
Crazy.
no.
Nightshade family tomato.
Yeah, no.
People
the
thought it was poison.
Food in Italy is superb.
Yes,
Pasta. Oh man, it's so good.
I believe it. I love olive oil. Anything with olive oil.
Yeah, man.
You know
Their
what?
pizza's good. It's different from how the way it is here, but it's definitely better, and it is definitely better than Godfather's pizza.
Well, wait a second. Are you saying there's no stuffed crust over there? Is that what you're saying?
No. There's no. Do you have any DiGiorno here?
Yeah.
Do you have any Red Baron pizza?
I would like your finest pizzone, please. I would like some crazy bread if you wouldn't buy it.
Yes. Where is your unlimited salad and breadsticks?
I want to take my mama to Carrabba's here in Rome, Italy. Could you,
The Olive.
when you're here, your family,
The Olive Garden
Il Familia.
in Rome. Pasta Primavera. Olive Garden in Rome. My God. It's like do you know they did put Taco Bells in Mexico at one point? And they're like, Doritos
Okay.
Locos Tacos, just like Mom used to make them.
That is something I've always, I mean, just the obverse of that. I've always found it interesting when foreign countries depict the United States. Like you'll watch some foreign film, some like Japanese movie or Japanese video game. Mainly it's Japan, but like, you know, like just a foreign country depicts what America is like and doing it in a very bizarre and strange
What's
way.
a good example? I'm interested.
There's a game called Deadly Premonition where the depiction of America is mostly based on the show Twin Peaks. But, you know,
God.
Silent Hill, that's also made by Japanese people and set in America. There's a game called Shadow Hearts, one of them, The New World, and it's set in America, and it's like this weird, effed up, bizarro, weird thing. I'm trying to think of even more examples. There's so many examples.
I think a lot of people think they're kind of like the Wild West a little bit. you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, the guns, there's guns everywhere. America has a reputation for being litigious. Everyone sues one another.
But we invented the stuffed crust pizza,
Yes.
Max.
All right.
We said we can take your pizza crust to a whole nother level.
We're taking it to that next level. Yeah. Exactly.
Pizza. Yes. The best pizza. Little Caesars.
Taco Bell pushing the limits of what tortilla, cheese, lettuce, tomato, and
Grade D meat.
meat,
Meat.
non-specific
substitute
meat, grist, what edible cellulose can do. Go to Mexico and ask for the what's
Spicy gordita crunch.
is that what the octagonal thing?
Oh God, those things.
They call them
Crunch Wrap Supreme.
Yeah, can I have a Crunch Wrap Supreme, please, if you don't mind?
Vicente Fox. Show me where the nearest Crunch Wrap Supreme is.
God, that's a blast from the past. That was so long ago when he was in charge. I don't even know who the president of Mexico is currently.
I don't remember.
I think it's Venustian Carranza. That's his name. That's the guy.
Carranza. That was 110 years ago.
I'm kidding. Yes.
There is in one of the East stories a Carranza field.
That's right.
There's
because-
also a Gateau field. I threw
Toe? Oh my God. Yes, of course.
This guy's like, he earned his wings on April 3rd, 1943 at Gateau Field or something like that. No. It's in the one where it's in Venezuela and the guy shoots down like two like crop dusters that the banana board guerrillas have captured.
The syndicalists, of
The
course.
syndicalists, of course. He takes off from Gateau Field. I remember throwing that in and you sent it to me and you're like, what?
What? I've almost finished a biography of Garfield, and you know how that biography's going to end.
Hated Mondays.
Yeah. Oh my God! If he got shot on a Monday, that'd be the funniest thing ever. That'd be so funny and sad, but also very, very funny.
Oh my God.
One day my spirit shall inhabit. One day I will rise from the grave 100 years from now, and you will know that I was right. That Mondays are indeed the worst.
Oh no, I'm a cartoon cat now.
Thank you for bringing me lasagna as I lie on my as you're probing through my abdomen to get the bullet lodged in my spine. Thank goodness I have this lasagna here. My Dr. John here, who's got my best interest in mind. Thank you, John. Somehow I feel we will be friends again one day. If only I'd killed Tilden when I had the chance. To feel that pistol in my hand. I'd walk up behind him on that train platform and bust a cap in his ass.
And then go write some Greek in one hand and Latin in the other. And send him to Abu Dhabi. I hope you don't send me to Abu Dhabi at the end of this.
Let me tell you, that Nermal,
Named after my Secretary of War, John Nermal. I always hated that asshole.
He wrote a mathematical proof. He's still the only U.S. president to write a mathematical law or whatever to be added to, like, the scholarship of math.
What about Carter's Law?
Carter's Law?
When you get your ass kicked by Iran, you lose the election.
Oh, no.
There's your proof.
Oh, no. God, poor Garfield. I really feel for him.
You feel bad a little bit laughing about it.
I mean, yeah, I do often. In the previous
he did
episode,
die in a heart. It was not good.
It's a complete travesty the way he died. It's like on the level of George Washington, where he had
some sort of throat infection.
My throat is a bit sore. Okay, let me just bleed out a gallon of your blood, and then you just die
because you're
in agony. It's like it sucks big time. But like in the previous episode, I was editing the part where we are talking about plane crashes, and we're like laughing our asses off. And
you were talking about the one with the crocodile, which in a dark, horrible humor way is kind of ridiculous. This idea of people tipping a plane over because the crocodile got out.
That's kind of why we're laughing, because it's just so horrible. I mean, it's oh boy, Garfield.
Talking about lasagna, which actually is one of my least favorite forms of pasta.
Is that right?
I don't love lasagna that much. I'll eat it some, but there's way better.
Let me think.
Arrabbiata is good. Pasta arrabbiata, spicy tomato sauce.
No clue what that is.
It's a pasta with a spicy tomato sauce. I had it when I was in Rome. It's fabulous.
Now, is the pasta shape at all important for...
supposedly, there's some shapes hold certain types of sauces better. I forget the specifics. You have a meat sauce, a certain type of pasta works better with that.
Yeah.
All you need is Chef Boyardee, man. Which, if you look at it, it's like these meatballs are made of turkey, chicken, and pork. You're like, what? Who makes that?
I'll be darned. Just like Mama used to
make them. Okay, we got to get back to Italy.
Yes. So, you were talking about Sicily a second ago.
Yes.
Or minutes ago, depending on how this is edited. But, the Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily. Palermo, you mentioned that.
Yes, well, the landings are not near Palermo. They're near. The Americans land near Gela, Scaglidi, and Licata on the southwestern coast, and then the British land on the southeastern coast, south of Syracuse.
And they're both racing to Messina.
Yes, because that was the goal, is Messina, which has traditionally been, so the traditional capital of Sicily is Palermo. And one more thing about Sicily, if you go there, you got to go to some of the temples there. There's some great ancient Greek temples from Magna Graecia.
Got to go to temple.
You got to go to temple.
Zeus,
Zeus.
Saturnalia is happening. I got to go to temple.
That's right. Selinunte is on the southern coast is really amazing, and the Valle di Templi, the Valley of the Temples near Agrigento.
Okay,
really cool. There's one of the temples there that has fire damage from the Carthaginians.
What?
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's crazy. But the Carthaginians owned it, didn't they?
No, this was a Greek city, a part of Magna Graecia. So.
I thought they took Sicily from the Carthaginians in like the first Punic War.
They did, but these were cities from before.
Oh, okay, understood.
Okay,
right.
So Italy, so Sicily, yes. So the race is for Messina because Messina is the point. It's literally actually, when we flew off the island, you can see
The two of us, when we flew off.
That's right.
Yes.
You and I, Max, together. No, an unknown we.
Yeah.
The royal we. As you
Yes,
say.
the listeners. When you and the listeners.
When we were all on that ITA Airways flight. Fine airline, I think. Well,
if you
when
survive it once, it's good.
Yes.
Adequate.
No.
It did its job.
Yeah, that's right. Now onto Ryanair.
Wizz Air.
Wizz Air, my favorite.
Hungarian airplane.
Ryanair, what an airline.
Yeah.
I've flown it, I think, twice. My experiences weren't actually horrible, although I'm so sure some of our European listeners probably have. There seems to be a steady stream of interesting stories, but for my purposes, it worked well. But if you fly over Messina, you can see how close it is. It's literally like a mile or two. There's a little ferry that runs between the mainland and it. Point is, that's the main point that you get from Sicily, especially at that time, the main ferry point between the mainland. So you capture that, you capture the German and Italian forces on the island.
Yeah.
So Montgomery obviously wants to take that. There becomes the race for Messina, which you see in the movie Patton.
And there was kind of a missed opportunity there. Didn't they let a bunch of Germans go?
Yes, because of that, a lot of Germans and Italians who could have been captured were not. Mm-hmm. And Sicily's a tough place to fight. It's very mountainous, particularly in the central part of the island.
That's the thing about the Mediterranean. There's just mountains all over the dang place.
A lot of mountains.
Yeah.
So here, what if Husky fails? What if there were really strong German counterattacks and nearly overwhelmed U.S. forces at Gela? It was much more of a close-run thing, but what bailed them out there and what will bail them out at Salerno and at Anzio, naval gunfire.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why the Germans didn't put their panzers too close to the water in Normandy, because they got burned on naval gunfire. Every time they got close, the Allies would call in fire from battleships and cruisers, which was absolutely devastating.
I'm sure. Just ask the Japanese in many, many, many,
Yes.
many places in the Pacific during World War II.
Yeah. So if Husky fails, what's next? I mean, do the Allies refocus on Greece, Sardinia, or can they can't really just sit there at this point?
And I guess this also means that Italy is still an independent Axis power, too. Do they surrender immediately the same way they do relatively shortly after the fall of Sicily?
Does Mussolini, because he falls after Sicily, and then a new government comes over and says, yes, Germany, we're just as strong as allies as you, which did not fool the Germans for a second. But we are still a committed fascist nation to fighting the Allies, but we aren't. And you know that, and we know that, but let's just not say it. Some truths don't need to be said, Max.
Yes.
But if Sicily fails, I feel like the Allies may try again. Or it may not be a complete failure. Maybe the Americans are driven off, but the British retain their toehold, so the campaign takes longer. Sicily needs to be taken, because the real controversy about the Italian campaign really doesn't actually start until after Sicily, because you need to capture Sicily, because if you capture Sicily, the central shipping lanes in the Mediterranean are now completely open to the Allies.
Yes.
Because German bombers and fighters, or any sort of air power based in Sicily, is a threat to cross Mediterranean convoys. But as soon as you capture Sicily, and Sardinia too, you've pretty much eliminated that threat. Significant enough that protects the line to the Suez Canal. So really, taking Sicily is not that controversial. The real controversy of the campaign comes when you talk about the invasion of mainland Italy.
Was Sardinia taken without a fight? Or was
Not
there
without a
fighting?
fight, but much less so than Sicily and mainland Italy.
Okay.
There was fighting, but not a ton. Corsica was not a lot of fighting either.
Yeah, that would be also Vichy, correct? So
Well, it would have been reoccupied by the Germans or the Italians at that
right.
point.
Of course.
Because when the Vichy French, because the Vichy French government is taken over by Germany.
because of North Africa.
Was it Case Anton or something is what it was called, is what the operation was called, but they just took
so many
over.
cases. There's cases all over the
Yeah,
place.
I know. Yeah.
Gelb, Blau, all those.
Yes.
All those cases. Rot. You know,
Rot.
Come on.
Vach am Rhein.
The cow
Watch
on the Rhine? What?
Vach am Rhein.
Yeah, I'm joking.
The cow on the Rhine.
Vaca.
Yes, so I feel like it's necessary that the Allies will attempt to take Sicily, or they'll focus on Sardinia or Greece. You have all this. Something's got to happen with these forces. Maybe more are sent to England, but as you said, England can't take a whole lot more.
Yeah.
So, okay, next. This is where it gets more interesting. What if the invasion of Italy fails?
Okay.
What do you think happens? Well, what are your thoughts, Max? And we're talking, let's say, September 1943, Salerno. The Allies are repulsed.
Yeah.
German counterattacks again, barely stopped by naval gunfire and some really tough fighting by the Allies. Let's say they succeed. defeated at Salerno. However, remember, the British land actually 6 days before Salerno, September 3rd, 1943. Operation, is it Slapstick?
I think it
no,
is.
Baytown. Is it Baytown or Slapstick? One of the two.
I can look that up. This way?
No, go down. Operation Baytown. Operation Baytown. So the British had actually landed 6 days before the landing at Salerno. They landed in Reggio Calabria, which is the tip of the boot. They had almost no resistance whatsoever. But, or the Allies, let's say, are thrown off Italy entirely. Let's just call a total defeat. The British evacuate from Reggio Calabria. We're left at Sicily. What happens next, Max?
Well, maybe, just maybe that's a blessing, because people relentlessly criticize landing at Salerno in the first place. Because landing at Salerno, to get north to go to Rome, you have to go through rivers and mountains, just the most horribly grinding defensive terrain. Monte Cassino is in between Salerno and Rome.
And that's where Day of Battle shines, is how well of a job Atkinson does depicting the absolute grinding horrors of fighting in the mountains of Italy in 1943 and 44.
Yeah, the Rapido River.
The crossing of the Rapido River, Cassino, Monte Cassino. My God, I mean, the fighting in the mountains and the hills at night at close ranges with terrain that in every way, as I slam the chair, in every way favors the defender.
And a deceptively harsh climate. It gets really cold. You get malaria. There's swamps all over the place.
Yeah. Well, it goes from very flat to very mountainous very quickly.
Yes.
And those hills are tough. I mean, they're beautiful defensive positions. I mean, they're as good at defensive positions as you could find. And they're big mountains. I mean, they're snow-capped mountains in some places. So they are high up. They are tough ridge lines. The Gustav line was hard to break for a good reason.
Also, the Germans send some of their best troops to defend against this stuff. They send like
Fallschirmjäger,
yeah. Alpine divisions get sent there. Just some of their most elite fighters go there.
And then they don't even have to be that elite as an infantryman. You have a good machine gun position with interlocking fields of fire and decent artillery
and
support.
good cover as well.
And good cover. What is it? Is it 3 attackers for every 1 defender or something like that is what you need? And you probably need even more in a place like, it is what the 3rd, 34th, 36th, and 45th Infantry Divisions go through in fighting. I mean, the casualty rates are astonishing.
Yes.
And it's interesting, kind of a side fact is that I was watching there's a professor who does some lectures on YouTube that were at like the War College about the Mediterranean theater, particularly Italy. And he talked about how Mark Clark really liked to reward bravery. So Mark Clark, he approved like more medals of honor than like any other theater commander. And it's like 1 out of every 3 U.S. Army soldiers who received the Medal of Honor in World War II earned it fighting in Italy. And well-deserved, because the fighting in these places, and I wish that more Americans were aware of this, because the bravery and the real grit, I mean, this is as close to World War I as World War II gets in some places.
I've heard it described as fighting World War I with World War II technology.
Yeah.
In a lot of these places. It's just terrible. It's just so bad.
And there's a reason why, people kind of want to forget perhaps about it, because...
Yeah. Well, especially after the taking of Rome. I mean, that's when it really becomes a backwater sideshow.
Yeah.
That gets completely forgotten at that point.
Yeah, but particularly that point in front. I mean, the disasters, and we'll talk about Anzio in a few minutes, but... We were making a lot of mistakes here, inflicting a lot of casualties on the Germans, but taking a massive amount. I mean, there were absolutely more Allied casualties in Italy.
Unquestionably.
Maybe in the grand scheme, if you count captured soldiers in the whole of the campaign from 43 to 45, maybe there's more German casualties technically. But like truly,
it's also hard to record these things.
Yeah.
On the German side.
Yeah.
But and look at a topographical map of Italy, like a mountain range going right down the middle.
The Apennines are a spine that run right down the middle of the country.
And then on either side of those mountains, there's rivers constantly. It's like Virginia in the Civil War, like just
the Rappahannock, the Rapidan, just one
river after river after river.
Exactly. But the Italian campaign, absolutely brutal. So if there's a failure here, what happens? Is D-Day delayed? I don't know. Maybe a renewed focus on Sardinia or Corsica. Maybe Anvil Dragoons still happens. I don't know. Because the air bases that are supplying it are mainly coming from Sardinia and Corsica. Yeah. You don't necessarily need Italy, but Italy is still a good air base, for the Germans to attack. So... And are the Soviets like, what the hell, man? You're feckless. Like, you have land 3 divisions and they get repulsed and,
And then you just give up.
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, what does this look like? Again, maybe this a delay of the war, but again, as I said, the expiration date we have somewhere in the July-August 1945 range, as long as the atomic bomb is available.
I feel like the atomic bomb just kind of puts things over the edge a little bit. I mean, you still have to grind them down on the ground to a certain point in order to reach that surrender. So it's not just an atomic bomb.
It's not
You
just an
also
atomic bomb.
have to inflict an attritional
War, yeah.
before that atomic bomb can finally cause a surrender.
True. So, well, let's move away from failures of these invasions to what if the Allies were more limited in their objectives?
Yeah.
What if they realized that this is terrible terrain, all we got D-Day that's coming up next year.
Yeah.
Maybe why don't we just seek to capture Rome or the area south of it? Or what the real, and the guy, I forget his name, I can see his face, who was talking, who gave that lecture. He talked about really in his mind, the only really strategically valuable thing the Allies wanted in Italy, or there was in Italy, was the Foggia airfields. Foggia in the southwestern part of the country it's a very flat area, massive amount of areas for bomber and fighter bases for the Americans.
Is there like prevailing winds that make it advantageous?
No, it's just a huge flat plain, which is unusual for that part of Italy, but it's well located because those Foggia airfields, B-17s, B-24s, P-38s, and P-51s based out of there can get to Ploesti. They can get to actually southern Poland, parts of southern Germany, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, areas that fighters and bombers based in England cannot reach.
Nor North Africa.
Nor North Africa. Actually, you can reach North Africa with B-24s. That was Operation Tidal Wave, the attack on Ploesti in July of 43 or August of 43, launched by B-24s from North Africa. However, no fighter support because no fighter at that time can get all the way from North Africa.
Makes sense.
But there actually was an attack before that in, I think, June of 42. The Halvorsen Project, B-24s launched from North Africa, attacked Ploesti. It's one of the first American engagements with the Germans in World War II.
Wow.
Almost forgotten. It's like 12 B-24s were involved. Halvorsen Project, and those later get used against the Germans in North Africa. But
well, you want to talk about bombing. Italy was also an important lesson in bombing not just wide grid squares, but actual precision bombing. Bomb just the enemy position and not bomb your own guys, which they did frequently. But it's part of the learning process. They would make that mistake too in Normandy during Cobra. They bombed a bunch of our own
they
people.
killed Leslie McNair, who was the Army Ground Forces commander.
Big mistake. Big
Huge
mistake.
Disaster.
Yeah. But these are the kinds of things you learn over time.
So what happens if the Allies say, we're just going to take those Foggia airfields and just stay put?
Well, the Germans are not going to hold south of that. I mean, once you take that, it's untenable for them to continue fighting down south.
That's true. And it's a smart move. Maybe you save a lot of soldiers' lives. But the problem is warfare is not just about moving around units on a map. There's a political element to it.
Yes.
And that's the whole thing. You've got the Soviets saying, what the hell are you doing? You landed and you stopped. And you can make an argument, well, we have enough space now to launch the attacks from Foggia. But what are the American people going to think? Why did we stop? Are we being defeated? What's happening? There is a political element that we have to keep pushing forward or attempt to keep pushing forward instead of just sitting there doing nothing.
Gosh, I can't remember who it was, but I think it was Frederick the Great said that any advance is a victory. So, like, if you're occupying more territory, to a certain extent, you're winning.
Yes.
It's an indication of winning.
Absolutely. So, and perhaps this is a smarter way if we aim to just take those Foggia airfields, push far enough that they weren't in danger of German artillery and just stop. Say maybe the horrors of Cassino, fighting on the Gustav line, the Volturno line, Anzio are spared from us. But how does this look? Because warfare is fought. We like to talk about it in the past tense, but when people are making decisions about it, it's happening in real time.
Yeah.
And, they don't know what the outcome's eventually going to be.
No.
We know that D-Day will be successful, but they don't know that in September of 1943.
They don't know if the Pacific or Europe is going to be the first place to be a victory. They don't know anything.
Well, they don't. And people, we're the victims of hindsight in a bit, but like, I feel like if you asked most Americans or British people in the 40s, in 1943, 44, when will World War II end? 46 to 48 was probably the guess most people would have given you.
Yeah.
Golden Gate by 48 was something that American soldiers would sometimes say going out into the Pacific. I mean, people didn't know how long this war was going to last. We know it ends September 2nd, 1945, but it wasn't guaranteed at that point. No one knew that D-Day was going to go the way it was, that Bagration was going to literally tear a hole in the German lines 500 miles long.
I'll say Midway is almost miraculous in how much of a victory that is. And if that didn't happen, then,
Yeah, I mean, this is
chasing aircraft carriers for even longer.
So it's hard. I mean, tactically, perhaps, yes, we just stay put, but I don't know if that's really an option. We could have been smarter. We could have tried to land farther north, like near Anzio.
That would have been great.
September 43. We probably would have needed to capture Sardinia first to do that, because the airfields in Sicily were not close enough to support a landing near Rome. They could have supported a landing near Salerno. In fact, the Germans figured out we're going to land at Salerno because they knew the operational ranges of Allied air power, and they literally took calipers and put down and said, what is the farthest extent and what's the best landing zone? And shockingly, Salerno right at the edge of it.
So speaking of calipers and the Germans, there's actually an excellent propaganda leaflet that the Germans dropped incessantly over Italy. It's the specter of death. It's a skull-faced guy in a robe, and he's got he's got the compass, and he's measuring things, and it's like, okay, Salerno by this date, Monte Cassino by this date, Rome by this date, and it extrapolates it and says you'll get to Berlin by sometime in 1951 or something like that. Speaking of timetables is what it says in big letters on it. And if we were going purely Mediterranean, maybe it would take until
yes. Exactly, yeah. And that's in that if George Patton slept here, that was one of the alternate generals stories, is that the Allies do land north. They land at Civita Vecchia, which is the port city of Rome, the old port city, which, by the way, if you're in the Rome area, go to Ostia Antica, which is sort of like a smaller version of Pompeii, but it was silted up instead of volcanic, and it was the old port of Rome. It's really cool. There's like an amphitheater preserved there. It's right near the Rome airport. It's like 15 minutes from the Rome airport, if that.
So it was previously a port, but it's now far, far inland.
No, not that. The river, the Tiber, is not that far, but the Tiber is probably a couple hundred yards from it now. It used to be right on it, but it just silted up the city over time. So you land there and take Rome and spare the horrors of that fight in southern Italy. That could be good. And maybe that makes the Americans focus more on Italy now if it's much more of a bloodless affair. But you still got to fight your way up the peninsula, though.
I mean, it's so tempting to just skip Monte Cassino because it really is so horrible. It is such a horrible, horrible battle, destroying this ancient, beautiful, beautiful monastery.
Which they rebuilt.
Which they rebuilt, sure. But I mean, have you been there?
I have not. No, okay. I'd like to at some point.
Yeah.
You can look at it on Google Maps. It looks pretty cool.
It looks great. It looks beautiful.
I'd like to get to more southern Italy. That'd be fun. And northern Italy. There's a lot of places I'd like to go. There's so little time. That's why I pin all my money on winning the lottery.
The lottery.
And not the lottery in the Sliders episode either.
No.
Although, I guess we could go meet Jerry O'Connell. Let's write to him.
Get those white card privileges.
Jerry, my favorite episode were all the ones in the 4th and 5th season.
For me, it was the one, Fever, because you have your shirt off and you're getting sprayed down by those kids.
Jerry, here's my ace stories. What do you think of mine?
Were you an ace in Vietnam? I know. Well, you were born 20 years earlier also as part of this for some reason.
You'll understand. There's no Charlie in this story, Jerry. It's just you and me.
I'm your brother, Jerry. Matthew O'Connell.
And John Rhys-Davies can be our dad, and we can go on fun season 3 adventures.
I was watching a video the other day about ninja movies, and they mentioned the show Chips, one of the early mentions of ninjas in American.
Really?
There's a stealth pilot episode where they were going to do a bunch of police ninjas who would fight evil ninjas, and John Rhys-Davies is the leader of the evil ninjas. So he's like jumping around in a mask, doing kung fu and stuff. It's completely absurd.
Yes. This proud Welshman, the leader, they had to stop from Japan and Wales to pick up
a master of ninjutsu, this man.
No. So next up, let's see. What if Sardinia was attacked after Sicily? Well, as I said, an attack on Sardinia actually would have been a decent move instead of of skipping out on Sicily, or after Sicily going to Sardinia, because that gives you a stepping stone to invading France, but also a stepping stone to land north of Rome.
Yeah.
So it really, taking that time and maybe delaying the invasion of Italy a little bit to capture Sardinia, could have helped save the Allies a lot of blood.
Who could have known that the Italians would just fold so quickly?
Yeah.
Like, you really don't know that. So, like, if you attack Sardinia and attack Rome, maybe you think the Italians are going to fight tooth and nail. And of course they don't. Of course they don't. But you don't know that.
They're
ahead of
lovers,
time.
not fighters. Yep.
They have one of those fantastic world of Portuguese sardine places.
Yeah, you told me about that. It made its way over here.
In Times Square. Yeah, it's crazy.
I can go there after I go to the M&M store.
Yes. The eternal M&M store.
Yes.
Yeah.
And buy in bulk.
One of those big tubes or whatever, and bring in a giant burlap sack to just...
Garbage bag. I get a 55-gallon garbage bag of...
Do a robbery of the M&M store to steal
just M&Ms.
something that you can buy in immense quantities for no money elsewhere.
Go in there, ask them, do you have any Skittles? No, get the hell out of here. Taste the rainbow.
Which division was the Rainbow Division?
42nd Infantry Division.
Gotcha. Nice.
Yep. 42nd Division in World War I, commanded by Douglas MacArthur, and then 42nd Infantry Division fought in eastern France and southern Germany. 7th Army, 6th Army Group.
Interesting.
Yeah.
5th Army.
5th Army. That's Italy.
Mark Clark.
That's Mark Clark is 5th Army.
I'm segueing back to
Mark
where we
Clarkin.
were. Yes.
Yeah, no, 5th Army
Marcus
is
Clarkus.
Marcus
Yes.
Clarkus in his toga. He marched out.
Vini. Vidi. Wiki.
So let's get back. So what if Anzio succeeds? Also, Anzio, huge disaster. Really
bad.
We really fucked that one up.
Really bad. Yes. John Lucas.
Yeah, what if he hadn't dallied? What if he'd moved forward? Could he have unhooked the line at Cassino? Perhaps, although the Germans brought a counterattack awfully quick there.
Yeah.
Awfully quick. I don't know if Anzio was ever going to really succeed. Perhaps those troops would have been better used just being fed into the line at Cassino.
What is it? Operation Brass Rail or something? The supposed evacuation from Anzio if it screws up bad enough.
I know it was Operation Shingle. Was
yeah.
the name of the original operation.
Yeah.
Let's get on to this is the next one, because this is something that Rick Atkinson talks about, so you can probably talk about it more because you just heard the story. What if Mark Clark pushed to cut off the retreating Germans rather than capture Rome in June of 1944? This is the central controversy.
Yes, this is the most controversial thing, maybe of any commander in World War II. So Mark Clark decided to prioritize capturing Rome, which was an open city, undefended, instead of pursuing the Germans.
I think he's at Valmontone, right? Valmontone was the city he was supposed to go to.
Yeah, and then he just didn't. It's Rome time, baby. And he even talked about, like, if any of those damn British limey bastards try taking Rome, I want you to shoot them. Start killing them to prevent them from taking the Fifth Army's glory. He was a good general, except for the fact that he was just crazy. A crazy egomaniac.
In Hindenburg-sized ego.
Yeah. And I mean,
just as volatile.
Yeah. I otherwise, an excellent commander, but just the kind of the console wars that he has with his own allies is just unforgivably stupid. And he spends the rest of his entire life damage controlling about it. And, you know, other people are always giving their own impressions on what they think of the situation. But I think the consensus is that he made a big mistake doing this.
Well, I mean, cutting off those German forces. Okay, so Rome falls a little bit later, but if he can capture or kill a lot of those German troops, perhaps as they drive the Germans farther up the peninsula, instead of coming to rest on the Gothic line north of Florence, they can push past Bologna or into the Po Valley, which makes the fighting in April of 1945 a lot easier.
If you don't push the initiative, if you don't take territory when you have the opportunity to do so, it can just become a horrific slog, which is what the rest of the war in Italy is after taking Rome.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, too, is that, and this is what hurts Clark the most in this argument, his detractors have a great point, is that why does Mark Clark do this? And he had all these justifications about, like, we could get to Rome quicker. I thought cutting him off. Mark Clark is by this point, definitely an army, if not an army group commander. He knows something. He knows that on June 5th or 6th, 1944, there's going to be D-Day. And he knows that once D-Day happens and once it succeeds, Italy will become a permanent backwater in the war. It just will.
Yeah.
And so maybe you capture Rome right before, and Rome does fall. I said in an earlier episode, we do make mistakes in these. I catch them especially a lot in the earlier ones. I said June 5th, 1944. It falls June 4th, 1944.
Unforgivable.
I know.
How dare you.
Unforgivable. But he knows that D-Day is about to happen, so maybe he can catch a little bit of fleeting glory, which dovetails well into other people's criticism of him.
Yeah.
But perhaps the campaign could have been eased up a little bit if he had gone there. So again, that is the central controversy. And the thing is that Mark Clark is failing at alliance warfare in the most polyglot command of the whole war. I say polyglot. I meant, you know what it is polyglot because there's so many, but it's a most eclectic command.
It is. I mean, he's got New Zealanders. There's freaking, speaking of the North African campaign, there's a lot of Tunisian and Algerians who fight, French colonial troops. Yeah.
Gooms. Gumiers.
Gumiers,
Who were very feared by the Germans because they were like very vicious.
They had a reputation, yes.
The Brazilians, the Jewish Brigade, South Africans, British, American, Canadians. I don't think there were any Australians. Indians, you had Gurkhas. There's like pictures of Gurkhas.
Yes, there are Gurkhas.
Gurkhas fighting. There was Gurkhas that almost captured Monte Cassino. Yeah, I mean, like there's Poles.
Yeah,
Proud
Poles.
Polska. They took. Yeah. They could take Monte Cassino.
They put the Polish flag above it when they captured it.
They did.
Yeah. They even suggested to Mark Clark, hey, you could have the Poles march with you. And he was like, yeah, no, absolutely not. It's all the Fifth Army. It's all the Fifth Army. It's all America.
Yes, it's all...
Go screw yourself.
And here's the thing. A lot of Fifth Army strength does get sapped away for Anvil Dragoon.
Yeah.
Well, the 3rd, 36th, and 45th Infantry Divisions go. 34th stays, 1st Armored stays, and they're replaced by the 85th Custer Infantry Division, 88th, 91st, and 92nd Infantry Divisions. And the 85th and 88th are the first all draftee divisions to see combat. And we talk a little bit about this in the prior episode.
Like Harold Alexander, after taking Sicily, he gave up 7 divisions. Mm-hmm. And then I think after Rome, he gave up another 7 divisions after that.
Yeah, because the 1st and 9th Infantry Divisions fought in Sicily, but they go, and the 1st Infantry Division's at Omaha Beach on D-Day, and 9th lands on Utah not that long after. Yeah. 82nd Airborne actually sees combat in Italy, too, and that gets packed up. Although the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment, the Devils in Baggy Pants.
What?
That's what they're called, the Devils in Baggy Pants. Yeah, they fought as ground infantry at Anzio, and they miss D-Day, except for some of the troops were used as pathfinders. They were in England, but they were not at full strength enough. The 507th Parachute Infantry Regiment replaces them, and then the 507th gets stripped out, later to be included in the 17th Airborne Division for use in Operation Varsity, and the 504th sees combat at Market Garden and at Battle of Bulge.
Okay.
So there are people, I don't know if there's any left now, there may be 1 or 2, who were members of the 82nd who had 4 combat drops in World War II. Sicily, Salerno, D-Day, and Market Garden. How could I forget?
How could you forget?
The Dutch government is now going to call me up and apologize to me. Just kidding.
Apologize to John Frost's descendant for forgetting about Market Garden.
That's right. That's also actually a pretty cool country, too.
Yeah.
Amsterdam's an interesting city.
I bet it is. You've been there, yes?
I have been there, yeah.
Yeah. I've never been there, but I did play a Call of Duty map that was set in Amsterdam, so I've pretty much been there. Yeah.
They have great Asian food. Great.
Really?
Thai food and Indonesian food. Fabulous.
I was going to say because of their colonial past.
Well, in Indonesia, for sure.
Yeah, not in
fabulous.
Thai, but yes, Indonesia.
Yeah. And great Thai food, too. Ooh, so good.
Okay.
Yeah. It's an interesting city. The airports, I like Schiphol Airport.
Schiphol.
Makes sense. I like airports that make sense.
Okay.
That are laid out in a format that is easy to understand.
Charles de Gaulle, no.
Designed by a madman with style is what I would say. It's insane. It makes no sense. And connecting through there is a wing and a prayer. It really is. But it is a very beautiful airport. And it has a cool layout and all that. But getting through it is insanity. But the Lisbon airport, designed by mere madmen. It's also a single runway airport, which is tough for a big city.
Yeah, that is tough.
Yeah, but they have O Mundo Fantástico Portuguese sardines or whatever.
They do, yeah.
So there's that. But yes, no, it's an interesting airport.
Single runway, that's difficult sometimes.
Yeah, well, it's fine if it's a small regional airport, but it's an airport serving a pretty decent-sized city. Lisbon only gets more popular. So
even if it is a small airport, like Tenerife, the worst air disaster of all time happened on a small single runway airport because of...
No. Again, Lisbon, great city, great food. Portuguese food's very good. Seafood, you gotta like it. And pastéis de nata, pastel de nata.
De nata?
Egg custard tarts there.
Okay.
So good. Oof. Delicious. And good bologna and cheese sandwiches.
Yeah.
Bologna, the most European of meats.
And a good cheeseburger at the Hard Rock Cafe
That's
as well.
right, yes.
You know someone. You know a certain someone
who
decided to do that instead of...
Why? You can get a hamburger anywhere here.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm in Rome, Italy. Let me get a hamburger, please.
Yes, please.
You don't mind.
Why? No, why? Why would you do that?
What is wrong with you? Where's the McDonald's?
Please.
I'm loving it.
You know, actually, I ate at a McDonald's in Portugal, too. Remember I told you about that? The one that has all the Imperial McDonald's in Porto, Portugal.
With the freaking murals and
it has these
glass.
Leni Riefenstahl giant eagles out in front of it. It's got chandeliers and mosaics on the inside of it.
Dedicated to the memory of the great Salazar.
Who is actually the namesake of Salazar Slytherin in the Harry Potter books.
Is that right? Oh, that's right.
J.K. Rowling lived in Porto, and in fact,
did. Yeah.
Somewhat of the uniforms, the students of the University of Porto walk around in these, they're called the bats. They're dressed in these uniforms that they make them look kind of like bats, and that's apparently one of the inspiration for the Harry Potter robes. I don't know. All I know is that apparently
it's because you're such a big fan of Harry Potter that you know all these things.
Yes,
of course.
That's right. The one Harry Potter fact I do know for sure that I really like is that apparently before there was indoor plumbing, that wizards just vaporized their shit after they took it.
Yeah.
You told me that one. I actually hadn't known about that one.
Yeah. She was like, there was no indoor plumbing at Hogwarts until 1860 something, because before that they would just squat down and then urinate and defecate there on the floor, and then
Alakazam
excremito delito.
That would have made those movies so much better.
That's world building right there.
Yeah. Yeah, Ray Fiennes. I want to talk about my plan to take over the world, but here, let me take a shit first and then vaporize it.
Let me unleash the beast here.
Look away, Jason Isaacs. And if it was so efficient, why did they need indoor plumbing?
They should continue that tradition. I think in Florida they have like a theme park where there's a bunch of Harry Potter crap all over the place.
Oh, Universal Studios.
Yeah, Universal Studios.
I've actually been to it years ago.
Yeah. They should let you, defecate.
Take a shit.
Walk there in your robes.
Hey, kids. Yeah. Talk about, my God, you can buy let's buy a wand, and it's a stick, and it's like $80. And you're like, what the fuck?
Genius.
It's $140 for Harry Potter robes.
Evil.
And they spent $3 to make this. It's like they're making like
$3? $3? Less than $3. Definitely.
Whatever they're spending per unit cost. They are making so much profit. They are laughing. I half joke that at any of those theme parks in Florida or California, wherever you go, that you go there.
Atlantic City,
that they have people at the front who turn you upside down and shake you so they can get all the chains out of your pocket. Walt Disney says you shouldn't be a cheap ass. Come on. It just is. Yeah. Not Michael Eisner. Who is it? The guy who's Bob
Iger.
Bob Iger needs all your cash.
Yeah. God,
Let's go to the Germany.
Let's go
to the Germany.
No, I'll tell you where you got to go. You need to go to the Star Wars hotel where you can't leave for like 3 days. Yes. You're stuck in the hotel the entire time.
No worries, Max. They shut it down. You heard about that, right?
No, I didn't.
They got rid of it. They closed it.
Oh my God.
Because they knew there were so many people in America and across the world who say, when I want to spend the money to go to Disney World, I don't want to see the rest of it. I just want to see the Star Wars stuff. Nope. $6,000 a night? Sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Guess what? When I want to go to a theme park, I want to go and do whatever the hell I want. If I'm paying that much money to get into a theme park,
I mean, I hate the sun. I want to go into a windowless cavern and be there for days and days
like
straight.
the Germany buffet at Walt Disney World at Epcot. Any of those worlds you walk through, I wonder if people from any of these countries, someone from Mexico goes to the Mexico place and thinks, yes, this is authentic Mexico. Yes, this is Norway.
Just like Mama used to make.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Is men in lederhosen dance in alpine dress, blowing giant alpine horns as people go to pay $50 to get there.
This is so Bavarian centric. How dare you? It's too papist for me. Where's my true Lutheran German experience here?
The dockyards of Hamburg. It gets no more.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
Disney.
We're having a lot of good tangents in this.
Yeah, talking about the Mediterranean so much.
I know. We've
love
talked
it.
about the Mediterranean.
We have. We really have.
Yeah. But before we get on to the next section in it, you put down this note. Were the Allied airfields in Italy vital for eventual success? I do think you could make that argument. Shutting down Ploesti is very important.
Very important. Because that's one of the main oil fields for the Axis. Because, I mean, where else are they getting oil other than Ploesti and other than synthetic oil weirdness?
Yeah, liquefied. They make like wood burning, like crazy.
Wood gas.
Wood gas. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Like,
which is of a crappier quality.
I mean, where else? Where else do they get oil from besides Romania? I don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's vital. And attacking into places like Czechoslovakia where there was massive economic industrial buildup.
Yeah, the Skoda works.
The Skoda works. I mean, there are, you read in some of those ACES books, like the actual ones, not mine. Although one of mine, the David Attenborough one was in Prague. It's an escort mission to Prague. Remember that?
That's right. Yes, I do.
David
remember
Attenborough, proud American.
Yeah. Born in the USA.
Yeah.
He spells civilization with a Z. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Diarrhea. Not with an O.
Where the O comes in, not entirely sure how that. In the actual ACE books, there's one where it's like a raid on Prague or something like that.
Do you remember which one it is? There's 5, I think.
It's the first one.
The first
It's,
one. Okay.
Whatever. No, it's the first one that's in Germany.
I'm asking because I want to know which picture to put up when we're talking about.
Its ace is George Buck.
Buck.
And it's about a mission to Czechoslovakia.
His name is Buck, and he came here to party.
That's right.
As per Kill Bill Part 1, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And but yeah, attacking and also parts of southern Germany that were kind of far, Nuremberg, Munich, and also Austria. There was huge aircraft factories at Wiener Neustadt, Steyr, Vienna. Okay. One of those huge flak towers was in Vienna.
Oh, those flak towers are awesome. They're so cool. I think I've seen one of them in real life, but I was a kid at the time. I was in Vienna. I was in Vienna.
Also known as weaned to some of us. Weaned? That's right. It's W-I-E-N in German.
Yep, it's so true. And
Wien.
Munich.
Munchen.
Munchen. That's it.
Nuremberg.
Nuremberg. I've been to München. I've been to...
Me too.
Yeah, Munich. I've been,
drink this giant ass stein of beer.
You've been to the place where they blew up the swastika.
In Nuremberg, yes. The Zeppelin Stadium,
Yeah.
Went to Nuremberg for a day to walk around. And you go to the Congress Hall, which is like the largest extant building from the Nazi era. And then if you walk down the main like marching path they did for the Nuremberg rallies, you can get to the Zeppelin field. And yeah, that's where I have a picture standing like right near there, like where they blow up the giant swastika and all that. And I mean, Nuremberg's an interesting city. Munich is interesting too. It's a very different, 1939 to 1945. What happened? Who knows? Just kidding. Actually, if you ever go to a German city like Munich, Nuremberg, or Berlin, you got to go to the documentation centers. And each of them which is their museums about the Nazi regime, but they're not called museums. They call them documentation centers. But each one, so like the one in Munich is about the rise of the Nazi party, because Munich is where it rises.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Nuremberg is about the Nuremberg rallies and the Nuremberg laws.
The lights going up in the air, the rally that they had there. Yeah. The Cathedral of Light or whatever it was called. You also went to East Germany and the...
Yes. Yes, yeah, I've
The
been
Stasi Museum.
The Stasi Museum. Yeah, it was really interesting.
Yeah.
What used to be East Berlin, because you think of Germany as this like hyper advanced, and it is for a European country.
Yeah.
But you go to like what used to be East Berlin, and they haven't knocked all of it down, and you see this is what communist life was like.
Yeah.
Drab, dreary.
Paranoid.
Yeah. No, the Stasi Museum is fascinating. Highly recommend anyone go there. They found a way to spy on everybody. I mean, everybody.
I think there's still informants that they haven't released yet. Because you have to imagine, I mean, if you were informing on your neighbor, that's awfully awkward
Yes.
when it comes to time to release all this information years later.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, there's still people walking around who are Stasi informants. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
In good old Karl Marxstadt, East Germany. What a fascinating.
Fascinating. Yeah.
So, okay, let's get on back to again.
Well, let's say, let's go to alternates. Let's say the Allies invade Sicily and then stop. And they say, where do we go next? Maybe one place they could try going, Greece. What do you think about Greece?
I think this would be interesting. I think this is interesting because why would the Allies attack Greece over Italy? Because Italy has those airfields, which are valuable.
Yeah.
Greece is farther away from Germany, and the supply lines run through Yugoslavia, which has this massive insurgency going on.
This is very true. I mean, a lot of the fighting in Italy, as it goes further north, the supply lines for the Germans are shorter and shorter, and it becomes more and more difficult. But with Greece, you know, you have that buffer of partisans that it has to go through. So maybe it's beneficial to go there. There's also plenty of Greek partisans as well who could help out after invading.
And the
Unless
Allies
you
do.
ask ChatGPT, and then they'll say that they're fighting the Allies.
Yes, the Greeks bravely fought on the Americans.
Yeah, but they were
John
unable to
Smith
stop
sending
them.
his reports back.
I've been fighting for 16 months, and I'm afraid I have some bad news.
Just in case you weren't aware, we got our asses kicked.
But
So yeah, I think that this is interesting. So an invasion of Greece, in some ways, perhaps less risky. Although the problem to get to mainland Greece is that you have to capture first Crete and probably some of the other Aegean islands, the Dodecanese islands or Decanese. I can never figure out how to pronounce it exactly, but those are really small islands, and doesn't take a lot of strength on the Germans to hold out. So the Allies have to capture those, and Crete was actually very heavily defended. So then you got to land at Greece. And Greece also highly mountainous.
Yeah.
At least from what a terrain map appears to show.
yeah, maybe even definitely worse terrain than Italy.
Yeah, at least parts of Italy are flat. There's not a whole lot of flat in Greece,
Yeah,
from what I've been told. I mean,
what I've been told. Yeah, I've never been there personally, and neither
neither
have
have I.
you.
No,
Yeah.
I'd like to. It's on
Yeah.
the list.
Right after Albania.
Albania, yes. Right after Afghanistan.
Yeah, right after Eritrea, I'm gonna.
Yes.
Yeah. Right after the Swat Valley, I'm gonna visit.
Yes. Yes. Take my Wizz Air flight to. I don't think they fly to Pakistan.
Right after I visit Yemen, yeah, I'll take a trip there.
South Sudan, Mozambique, or Burkina Faso, Ouagadougou.
Bangui, right after I visit Bangui.
Yes, this is the Central African Empire, I assume.
yeah.
Where's your emperor so I may pay fealty?
I'm a Bokassa loyalist. Yeah. You know, his son / grandson / great grandson, I can't remember exactly, lives in France right now.
Really?
Yeah.
Does he claim the throne?
No, but I think I wonder if he shows up at like the royalist meetings every year.
The deposed royalists?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I showed you that picture of the king of Rwanda hanging out there, and he's like 1.5 feet taller than everybody else in the room. That's wild.
Oh my goodness. So Greece. So I think this would be interesting because Greece in some ways may be easier for the Allies to take in a way. But the problem is that strategically for the same amount of difficulty and prep, is not Italy a better place to attack? So what happens? So the Americans land in Greece. Let's say they get stopped somewhere north of Athens. So they've taken the Peloponnese, Crete, all that. Okay, so you have some airfields. Probably you're closer. Maybe you can get some long-range Mustangs, can take you all the way to Ploesti.
Yeah.
But you can't get to southern Germany. You can't get to Hungary, which there are some oil fields in Hungary. Not a ton, but there are some. I mean, it doesn't get you the advantages of that. And well, so you're helping the Soviets and the partisans, but also, I mean, it's a fun, and I'd like to write a story or a scenario at some point talking about an invasion of Greece, but like, what does it get you?
Yeah.
Pound for pound, that's better than Italy.
And maybe instead of
Euros gets you those. Those are tasty.
They are. Maybe instead of invading in Greece, maybe go further north, maybe Yugoslavia instead. Invade there.
Well, you have to invade Italy to get to Yugoslavia. That's the thing is that you have to make a jump. This would be like, I guess if you do the capture Foja cut, you stop north there and you say, we're going on to Yugoslavia.
Yeah. Okay.
Tito, our brother. So
our communists.
American and British forces land in Yugoslavia. So horrible terrain they got to get through.
Yeah, we were looking at the topographical map because we were kind of curious. We don't really know what Yugoslavia looks like from a elevation perspective, and the answer is pretty bad, not great.
Yeah, you land at like Split or Dubrovnik, and you got to get through what's now Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is very mountainous, very defender-friendly. So are we fighting the same war kind of, just in a different place?
I mean, once again, maybe, you're drawing the Germans into a weird place where they're not really fit to fight you.
That's true. And you got the partisans who may or may not be happy about the fact that you're present.
Also, part of the goal here is to draw German forces off from the Eastern Front. There's more overlap, I guess is what I'm trying to say, like range with airfields and troops and whatnot. They don't have to transfer as far to go to Yugoslavia from the Eastern Front than, let's say, going through the Alps to get down to Italy. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, yeah, you're right. No, you're right. And also there were substantial German forces, mainly internal security divisions in Yugoslavia, a lot of them. And significant portions of the country actually were under partisan control, to the extent that the Allies built emergency airfields that planes that were too damaged over Ploesti would land on.
Huh.
Yes.
Huh.
They felt that comfortable.
Well, it makes me wonder too, and this is just a side question for you here, but let's say we don't do a official invasion of Italy. Italy obviously has a lot of partisans in it. Is it possible for Italians to liberate themselves, or is that just too ridiculous?
I think that's too ridiculous.
Too ridiculous, okay. They need an invasion in order to be fully liberated.
Well,
right?
yeah, I just think the Germans can bring troops faster than... And the Germans, I mean, were absolutely vicious to Italian troops in some places. They massacred Italian civilians. In places in Greece, some Italian soldiers who rebelled were captured and massacred. Captain Corelli's mandolin talks about that on a Greek island. I forget which. It's in the Ionian Islands. Is it Kefalonia or Ithaca or one of those? I forget. Where they massacred a bunch of, like, hundreds of Italian soldiers who they captured. So, I mean, it was bad for sure. So, yeah, this is... I just don't know if an invasion of Greece gets the Allies a whole lot more, but it makes for some interesting alternate history.
Yes.
And is it done to put pressure on the Turks so the mighty Turkish army can finally intervene, instead of now in February of 1945 in real life when they intervene and they struck the final blow at Berlin, Max? Oh, wait.
Now they're going to intervene in January of 45. How about that?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
The masses of Turkish troops marching on the enemy as they turn around to go attack Armenia. Yeah.
We're going back, baby.
Okay, next up, let's talk about, in a more general term, the soft underbelly approach. What if the Western Allies adopt the soft underbelly approach and make the Mediterranean the primary theater in Europe, is what my note says.
Well, maybe they attack France, but primarily in the south of France. There's no northern invasion.
What if Anvil Dragoon is D-Day?
Yeah.
That could happen. I mean, there's actually... one day I want to review it's called the Hitler options, which is the first of the Green Hill, patient zero of the Green Hill.
What we call the Seurat style. I mean, it's not actually strictly Seurat.
No, Seurat has a story in it. That's the one where the Germans and Japanese link up in the Middle East.
Oh, God.
And then,
always count on him to do the kind of crazier
It's fun,
ones.
though. It's a fun one. But there's one about the Allies taking the soft underbelly approach, and the British guy who writes it thinks that the war would end earlier, December of 1944.
Okay.
And Anvil Dragoon in that is the main landing. That's the main attack on France. And that they take Sicily, then Sardinia, then they attack Salerno, and then land north of it at a place called the Gulf of Gaeta. And basically, the whole southern Italian campaign, Rome falls in like October of 43. Okay. Basically, the Allies are at where they're at in the fall of 44, north of Florence by the end of 43. Okay. 2 American armies launch the Po offensive in 44. The British 8th Army gets shipped to Yugoslavia. There's a landing in Greece. And his position is that It would shorten the war because it would bring a broader range of pressure on the Germans faster. That troops that are, instead of sitting in England, you have fresh infantry divisions are being routed to the Middle East, and there's already established supply areas, and they can be fed into a broader range, so there's more pressure on the Germans more quickly.
Interesting. I mean, I guess when you start an amphibious operation, it is so hard. It is so damn hard. I mean, when the Allies invaded in Normandy, they were just sitting there for a month plus. How long did it take?
It took June 6th.
Before Cobra?
Cobra is July 25th. And really, it's not until mid-August that Falaise is finally done. Paris falls, August 28th? Late August. So basically 3 months. It took the Allies about 3 months to really, truly break out of Normandy.
And I mean, the breakout is massive, but it's
massive.
Maybe there is something to be said for maybe putting more concentration on the southern area and just working from there. I mean,
yeah, it's farther away, but yeah, I mean, there is, I mean, here's the thing is, well, I love alternate history, so of course I'm interested in these sorts of things and thinking about them, but a soft underbelly approach, the problem is that it's the logistics. It's launching a war on that scale. And the thing is that the Americans, why they kept talking about landing in northern France, is it is the closest route. Because the thing is, good time to put up a map here. Let's say the Allies make the main thrust through Yugoslavia. So we land in southern Italy, then go into Yugoslavia. So we've got Patton on the Danube. And I remember I wrote a fun little short story where it's Rommel was American.
Yeah.
And he's talking about how they do a soft underbelly approach. And it's like American troops are in Hungary in like February of 1945. But the thing is that if you drive up the Danube, you take Vienna. Well, then you end up near Munich. But if you're going to get to Berlin, then you got to turn right.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do? We're going to launch a joint offensive with the Soviets from the east.
The Carpathian Mountains are very interestingly shaped, I'll just say.
Yeah. Well, it makes it interesting. I don't know if this is going to end the war early enough for then maybe the atomic bomb to come into play. Again, it comes back. It's like the never-ending super weapon, but it can't be discounted because if we're stuck somewhere, if Allied forces have just captured Vienna in August of 1945, we haven't landed in France and we're far away, well, maybe we drop an atomic bomb on Berlin, you know?
Yeah, but without any German territory occupied at all. I mean, is that decisive? Does that end it?
Well,
I mean, obviously it does a lot. Don't get me wrong.
No, you're
but
right.
I mean,
And you're absolutely right. You know, does Germany just surrender? Maybe not. Maybe not. I mean,
maybe not.
And
I mean, who do they surrender to? If you decapitate the government, I mean, who's in charge at that point?
It's interesting, this idea of maybe, let's say you don't do Normandy, but basically you have June 6th. Anvil Dragoon happens June 6th, but in southern France, and you have more troops in Italy. I mean, are you going to make Italy the primary front? I mean, it's just too constricted. So this world, let's say it ends in a victory for the Allies. You have a very substantial American and British presence in, like, you know, what are Americans capturing? Ploesti and Yugoslavia. What does this look like for post-Cold War? Because Stalin is not going to like this.
Is an excellent question. Yeah, he sure is not going to like all those filthy Anglos on his rightful
main
clay.
enemy.
Yeah,
Churchill. I knew it was always you. But yeah, what does this look like? How does this change the Cold War?
Yeah, is Tito still going to be the guy, even though he's a communist? Like, what's going on? Is Enver Hoxha going to be leading Albania in a situation like this?
I need my bunkers.
The questions. Oh my God.
No, but I mean, maybe it's better if the Allies take this approach. They launch a pronged sort of you put more troops into Italy. Maybe that accelerates a landing north of Rome. So you find yourself post. Like the end of 43, Rome has fallen. Maybe you send some troops into Yugoslavia, beef up the drive up Italy, and then you make D-Day an invasion of southern France, which may result in France falling at somewhat close to the same speed.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, maybe the war lasts a month or two longer, but if the war is about to end in June or July of 45 and the Germans haven't capitulated but are about to, they're not going to drop an atomic bomb. So I don't know. Maybe that is a better approach. Or maybe we're going to get stuck in some crazy, as they refer to if the Allies had fallen, a wild Pannonian goose chase.
Pannonian goose chase.
In Yugoslavia. Are we going to get bogged down in absolutely horrendous territory and conditions? And by the way, one of the poorest areas of Europe at the time. Not a lot of good rail connections.
No.
I mean, this would be tough fighting, and not like France that has a rail network that we can, rebuild after we blasted it to bits. But at least we have something to build on.
Yeah.
The question is it a better way to achieve the goals of what an offensive in Northwest Europe can achieve? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, you understand why the British took this approach, is that they did not have unlimited manpower, and they just had to be smart about how they committed it. And the problem is that the Americans, and to get a soft underbelly approach, you need the American high command to have a big change of heart, because George Marshall was dead set on. I mean, they pretty much said, we are not going to get dragged into, and in fact, the Americans dragged into the Mediterranean much more than they intended. I mean, Marshall did not want, was gymnast is what the plan was called in early 42, the landing in North Africa. And it was Roosevelt who made that call. And of course, Marshall respected it because he was the commander in chief. But like, Marshall did not want, he wanted a landing in 42 in France. And he said, fine, if not 42, 43. And then it just kept getting pushed because of the commitment in the Mediterranean. But
Yeah.
I mean, but to go back to what we talked about at the beginning, Max, was the Mediterranean worth it? Was it not worth it? Was it a waste? Should it have been done differently? Was some of it worth it? What are your thoughts?
I don't know. I think first taking Sicily and then attacking around Rome sounds like a great idea to me. Bypassing Cassino just seems great to me because Cassino, I mean, it's hard to read about. Like, that's why I stopped the book where I did initially. The book, I mean, is Day of Battle. Just because, like, God, it was just such a bummer just reading about all this slog that was happening, and then just bypassing it, taking Rome as quickly as possible, and then stopping, not even trying to proceed up north, I think would be good. I think so. I'm basically giving a half yes to the Mediterranean. I think the Mediterranean is good, just fought differently, I guess is what I'm saying.
I agree. I would say the same. I think that I don't think there's a really good argument to say that there was no strategic value in fighting in the Mediterranean, because we had to be fighting on the ground against the Germans somewhere, because if the Soviets are taking on such a burden in fighting the Germans, we have to be fighting on the ground. We can't just be saying we're launching air raids on Cologne and Munich and stuff like that. I mean, and Dieppe, oh, whoops, what a great choice that was. I mean, it is. I agree with you that I'm frankly landing in maybe taking Sicily, then taking Sardinia, and then landing at Rome. Like, that would be, if we could save ourselves the horror of the southern Italian campaign. And now we're still capturing Foggia. We still have those airfields.
Would you do North Africa any differently?
Would I?
Well, I mean,
yes,
and that's keeping in mind that all the mistakes of North Africa are valuable. They're very valuable.
Well, I think that...
are they necessary, those mistakes?
Are they necessary? Well, I think... I think honestly, it's hard to say that we should have done it differently, because it is 100% in the interest of the United States Army to be making mistakes and learning them in Algeria, in Tunisia, in 1942 and early 1943, and not on the beaches of France in July 1943.
Yes.
Like, that was the delay that Torch forced was crucial to winning, because I feel like a early landing at D-Day is not just a question of how many fortresses and how many Rommel's asparaguses there were. It's a question of experience, and it's a question of shaking out some of the dead wood in the command structure. Do you want Lloyd Friedendahl commanding American troops landing in Normandy or the Pas de Calais? Do we want Dieppe again? I mean, there's a reason why I think that in many plays it was mishandled, the war in the Mediterranean. But it's an absolute vital field, and we need to be making those mistakes, and we need to be making it in a place where a knockout blow can't be delivered.
Yeah.
There was no victory at Kasserine Pass that was going to reconquer Algeria and Morocco, but the Allies could have been defeated at the water's edge in an alternate world in which D-Day is accelerated.
I think that's an excellent summation. Yes.
Could the British have done better against Rommel? I find it, I probably should write something on it, but I'd love to. A Britain defeating, but also, I mean, the mistakes that you make humble you.
Yeah.
You learn it in your own life.
Yeah.
The mistakes you make you better down the line. And sometimes, again, is it better that the British get kicked around in North Africa in 41 and 42, shake out a lot of deadwood in the command, figure out how their armored units should be functioning, stuff like that, versus if they crush the Italians, sweep over some tiny Africa Corps, conquer Northwest Africa from the Vichy French, and then they're emboldened, and they're saying, well, of course, Crusader tanks and Valentine tanks, and this all works great. We've been kicking everybody's ass left and right.
If it ain't broke, why fix it?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a reason why the Soviets had. I mean, you can have great equipment, but if you don't have good tactics, I mean, the Soviet T-34 tank was better than anything the Germans had in Barbarossa, but the Germans still kicked the Soviets' asses in the early part of that campaign. Why? Because they learned the lessons. I mean, there's a reason why armies with more experience are better than those with less.
Yeah, what was the Soviet experience? Finland, where once again they got their asses kicked until they didn't.
And
until
frankly,
they won.
frankly, it was good that they would have been even more unprepared
Yeah.
if not for the Winter War.
Yeah.
I mean,
everyone forgets that the Winter War was a victory for the Soviets because it was just so embarrassing in the beginning.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a Pyrrhic victory, and I mean,
No,
well, not
I mean,
Pyrrhic, but they suffered horrendous casualties,
yeah.
much higher than the Finns did.
It was a victory that was at a high cost,
Yeah.
and that was a lesson for them.
I think that Montgomery could have been more aggressive if the Americans had been in a position to send ground troops to Montgomery. If he'd been a little bit more aggressive, maybe he got Patton there, I don't know, or someone. Maybe if he was bolder and had a little bit more troops to work with, he could have really crushed Rommel, and that would have made the Tunisian campaign a little bit easier. I don't know. These are all hard things to say.
Yeah.
But as I said earlier, I defend the fact that it was fought because it needed to be fought, the lessons we learned there, and the political aspect of it. We need to be fighting the Germans on the ground somewhere.
Yeah.
We need to be showing the Soviets that we're committed, because every day that we don't do anything fighting on the ground is more ground for them to come to a separate peace with the Soviets.
Yeah.
Which won't last, but will make the world a lot worse place.
And, that's again with the counterfactual. I mean, you can never really know what would or wouldn't happen. Like, is it even possible for the Soviets to stop the war with the Germans? And with hindsight, you can't really know. And that's the big threat. Is the big threat that Stalin just ends the war, stop halfway through Poland, and says, "I've had enough."
Cut a deal with the Germans. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think but I think there were a lot of missteps. There were, but it's also a good lesson for alliance warfare. We learned the lessons. I mean, that is his great strength. Eisenhower was not he wasn't really a ground commander. He never saw combat. He never commanded troops in direct combat.
During World War I, he was training people in America. Yeah, at
At
Gettysburg,
a tank school at
At a tank school at Gettysburg,
and what made him magnificent was he was a great supreme commander of an allied force. But he learned a lot and made a lot of mistakes starting off in the Mediterranean, where it wasn't fatal. And that is what's important, is all armies make mistakes. But when you put everything on D-Day, and if it fails, it's a huge screw up. But being temporarily pushed back from Libya into Egypt is something that you can recover from.
Yeah.
Or something, if you screw up the landing, if you screw up driving on Tunis and Tunisia in late 42, you can make it up.
Or frankly, if you screw up Anzio, you can still make it work. You can still make it up.
Yeah, a failure at Anzio is embarrassing and a disaster. But the Fifth Army is not getting dislodged. The Germans aren't going on simultaneous offensive. It's sort of like in the Almost America, where it's like the Battle of the Bulge one, where it's like, are the Allies in danger of being pushed off the continent in March 1945? No. It's the lesson of it, I think, is that, it was an absolute vital part of the war, but there was a lot of wasted opportunities.
Yeah, and that's why it's sometimes grueling to read the first 2 volumes of that Rick Atkinson book, because so much of it is humbling. It is humbling to read that and to see the United States armed forces
getting their asses kicked,
incompetent, and getting their asses kicked, and it's not a fun read as an American.
No,
but it's all that build up to the 3rd volume where the competence pays off. Those mistakes pay off. The dividends pay off, and we are ready for D. I mean, we have experienced units landing at D-Day. We have experience. I mean, in Husky, we land more divisions than we landed at D-Day. I think we land 5 divisions, or equivalent of 5 divisions, or some mixed divisions, but I think it was 7 or 8 divisions landed in Husky. I mean, in complexity, it rivaled D-Day, not in scale, but like the complexity of it, and in size wasn't too terribly smaller. Yeah,
I mean,
which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, it's just, you don't even get that much attention. And if you in Sicily, there's not a whole lot to it, because the Italians, I asked somebody about it there, and they said we don't like to remember it all that much. But there are bunkers and crap just scattered around. Not a lot of museums, but you can see stuff. I mean, but the point is that, like, again, it's a good training ground, and we need that. And just sitting and there's only so much sitting in England as you can do, as you said earlier. England can only hold so many troops. It can't hold 3 million more troops.
Yes.
And that pent-up energy has to be used somewhere. And those attacks, I mean, 15th Air Force, Norman Lear, who just recently died, was on a bomber, a B-17 bomber based in Italy. I mean, those attacks on Ploesti and on those things are more pressure on the Germans.
Yeah. Any attack on their ability to create oil is very important.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, before we finish off, let's talk about some important figures who fought in the Mediterranean.
Yes, we obliquely talk about these two people quite a bit, and I think it's important to kind of remind people that two very important senators in the United States were veterans of this Italian campaign post 1944. I think both of them
45, both
45.
of them.
Yeah, both of them were injured in 45. I'm talking about Bob Dole and Daniel Imwe. Daniel Imwe, senator from Hawaii, a Japanese-American, a Nisei unit guy.
442nd Regimental Combat.
Yeah, to go for broke, right?
Go for broke.
Yeah, yeah. And Bob Dole, who was
10th Mountain Division.
10th Mountain Division,
Which
yeah.
is one of the few divisions that came to Italy, or units that came after D-Day. 10th Mountain was specifically sent to Italy and earned a very good reputation in a very short period of time.
Yeah, both of them injured their arms. Inway, amputation. Bob Dole, not amputation, but still.
Loss of use of his right arm.
And
I mean, Bob Dole was
his
like
left arm's also messed up too. I mean,
it?
it's
But-
a spinal injury.
Yeah, but he was
a lot.
able to write and use his left arm to an extent.
Yeah.
I mean, Bob Dole and Daniel Inouye were like legit war heroes. Like
Yes.
they were. I mean, Daniel Inouye actually was awarded a Medal of Honor years later. You know, when Bob Dole, he was a combat veteran. I mean, he was not. I mean, I think it was a grenade or hit by machine gun fire or something like that. I mean, combat. He was an officer.
Yeah, and both of them injured not that far away from one another.
Yeah, in April of 45. That last campaign in the Po Valley, we didn't talk a whole lot about it today, but that fight to get over the final parts of the Apennines over to Bologna, over the Po Valley, vicious fighting, really vicious. And in a time when the Allies are just rolling over parts of Germany, they're over the Rhine, and they launch this final offensive, which some people question whether they should have done, which is perhaps another day we can talk about
a
it.
fair question.
But
Yeah.
really vicious fighting. I mean, the German 10th and 14th armies that were in Italy fought very hard against it. But yeah, I mean, they fought in the Mediterranean. That was their experience. Bill Malden,
Yeah, Bill Malden.
45th Infantry Division.
One of my personal heroes. I mean, when I was a kid, I read through those Bill Malden cartoons. I had a big book of them. And that just made a huge impression on me, both in terms of humor and in terms of understanding of the past. World War II. A lot of my initial interest in World War II came from reading those Willie and Joe cartoons, which if you haven't read those Bill Malden cartoons, they're incredible. He was a cartoonist that was embedded with troops in Italy. I think he eventually went to France.
Yeah,
at some
because the
point.
45th goes with the 7th Army up into lands at Anvil Dragoon and then fights in, onward with the 6th Army group. So in like the Alsace-Lorraine.
But he would do these like black and white ink cartoons of these two GIs, Willie and Joe, and they went through the entire war following the 45th Division, and they're fantastic. They're really good. Stars and Stripes, I believe, is where these were published, and they've got this great like gallows humor to them that's just awesome. I love it. Highly recommend them.
But captures just the grit and terrible nature of that fighting.
Yes.
Well, I think that's about it.
Oh. Patton hated them. Patton did not like those cartoons at all.
Of course not, because he thought he loved to fight.
Yeah, the glory and whereas
spit old blood and guts, spit and polish.
Yeah, Malden more the kind of cynical, kind of, darker side of things.
Well, I mean, Patton, very physically brave, but he also was a commander. He was not fighting in the trenches, so to speak. He wasn't lugging an M1 Garand around.
Yeah. Yeah.
But well, I think that's about it. I think
Yes.
this has been a great episode. I've really enjoyed talking about this.
I've enjoyed it as well. I think this was fantastic.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, you all have a great day.
Yes, I agree.
This is Matt signing off.
And this is Max signing off. You're not going to say have a good day, guys?
Have a great day, guys.
A great day. Even better than good day.
Even better than good.
Wow.
Great day. Marvelous. Fantastic, even.
This is a landmark in the podcast right here. All right. I'm going to say have a good day, guys.